10 spot we have the Queen's last photos. Look, these last photos of the Queen are not dark at all. Yes, I know the title of this video says dark, but I can't do it. I can't say that it is. The Queen literally looks so sweet in this photo, and there's nothing but light surrounding her. She reminds me so much of my granny. I hope they're having tea together in heaven. The Queen almost looks like an angel already here in these photos. In almost every one of these last shots shared, the Queen is smiling so big, as if she's just happy and not suffering or anything. Of course, the public doesn't know the details of her final days and what she might have gone through, but these photos would suggest that she was content in her favorite place, Balmoral, and just living up her final days on the planet. You could spin it and say that anyone's final days are dark, but nah, these are just bright and beautiful, and I refuse to associate them with the characterization of dark. In our number 9 spot we have Princess Diana's last shots. Here we have a bunch of shots of Princess Diana in her final hours, getting into her car with her bodyguard and the man that she was seeing, Dodi Fayed. She was in Paris at the time when her car crashed, killing all of the passengers in the car. There is one final shot of Princess Diana with Dodi in an elevator, and Diana is looking directly at the elevator camera and smiling. The shot is quite eerie as you look at her beautiful smile and spirit having fun until the end. What makes them even more eerie is if there's a slight part of you that buys into the theory that the crash was an insider job. That always makes me so uncomfortable to think about, and it quite possibly makes looking at these images more chilling. In our number 8 spot we have the Queen and Prince Philip. This is one of the last photos taken of Prince Philip at age 99 with Queen Elizabeth II. It's actually so sweet and sad at the same time as they look at a homemade wedding anniversary card from their grandchildren. The picture was taken to mark their 73rd wedding anniversary right before the prince passed away. Did y'all know that Prince Philip was already a Prince of Greece before he was married to Queen Elizabeth II and became Prince Consort and Duke of Edinburgh? Because I didn't, but honestly I should have guessed. I feel like the royal family previously used to keep the bloodlines quite close and within the realm of the blue bloods, you know? Ever heard of the blue bloods theory, anyone? People believe that you're either programmed in your blood to be wealthy or poor. It's a really interesting thought and rabbit hole to go down, that's for sure. In our number 7 spot we have the Queen and her grandson. One of the last photos of Queen Elizabeth II with Prince Louis, her grandson, is such a treat to look at. This photo was taken at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in June 2022, and honestly, earlier that day you do see the Queen looking possibly a little distressed. She's frowning a lot and truly just looking a little uncomfortable, but in this moment captured of the Queen and Prince Louis, she literally looks particularly blissful. Prince Louis is holding his ears in the most comical way, appearing a little distressed from the noise, I'm sure, of, you know, thousands of Brits below him that had come to honor the Queen in her celebrations. We have seen some other smaller royals do something similar when on the balcony in the past, but no one can deny that Prince Louis certainly is full of life and personality, and so it's really just a funny shot to see. Albeit sad though that perhaps the prince's last photo wasn't a smiling one, but I bet his adult self will appreciate the lightness of it. In our number 6 spot we have the Jubilee family photo. The last photo of the family together on the balcony without Harry and Meghan was during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration on the final day of June the 5th, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II can be seen with now King Charles III, now Queen Consort Camilla, Prince William, Duchess Kate, and their 3 kids, Prince Louis, Prince George, and Princess Charlotte. The royal family looks very happy to be celebrating the Queen's long reign. The Queen herself looks amazing in her vibrant green suit. However, in video footage from the time the family was on the balcony, the Queen does seemingly have moments of looking a little sad, and gosh, I wonder what's going through her mind. It's also really sad that this celebratory day is one of their last big celebrations and moments photographed together. In our number 5 spot we have Prince Harry at the Queen's funeral. These are a few of the last photos taken of Prince Harry at the Queen's funeral. Of course these photos are terribly sad to see and dark, as he is not only attending the Queen's funeral but his grandmother's funeral. In some of the photos you see the prince crying and hiding his face, and then you also see him walking during the service holding holding his wife Meghan Markle's hand. The prince stepped down from the royal family and gave up his name, and so during the funeral, we saw him be quite separated from his royal family. It was rumored that the prince and Meghan were snubbed for the funeral procession as they were seated in the second row behind the royal family, but whether that is protocol or snubbery, that has not been confirmed. Assuming it was protocol, that must have been so hard on him to not be able to fully be present with his family during this time, but hopefully he was included in ways we did not see. After Meghan Markle's expose with Oprah and the interviews that Harry has also done commenting on his family, I'm not so sure of that, but hopefully the death of the Queen will bring the family closer together again. In our number 4 spot, we have Prince William and Prince Harry together. One of the few photos captured at the funeral for Queen Elizabeth II is of Prince William and Prince Harry together, and these photos have had the world going crazy as to whether they are friendly or not. Some say that the two princes are not on good terms, while others say that they have made amends due to the passing of the Queen. What we are certain of is that they didn't seem to converse much during the service, and they definitely felt a tad frosty to each other. Although it was obviously a sad day, and perhaps the coldness of the photos really had more to do with their sadness for their grandmother and them both retreating within themselves mentally, as people often do at funerals, rather than them just being in a massive fight that has forever split them apart. The brothers were seemingly so close growing up, and so I think I speak for everyone when I say that I hope whatever is going on with them gets mended, because life is too short. In our number 3 spot, we have Peter Phillips. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Who? Peter Phillips is not a part of the immediate royal family, but he is the son of Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, and so he is another one of her grandsons. And while a rather dark photo was captured of him at the Queen's funeral that I just have to share with you all, he was caught possibly exposing his own thoughts in a photo from September 19th, the Queen's funeral, as he's walking behind Prince Harry and, yes, Meghan Markle. In the photo, he is glaring at Meghan Markle. Was he captured in a moment of internal judgment? Whatever is going on, it is clear that he feels some kind of negative feelings toward Meghan, and I mean, most of the royal family seemingly does, as Meghan has been exposing the behind the scenes goings on within the royal family. They have always been quite private, and the world saw them as a mystery, besides, well, some of the scandals that have happened over the years, but for the most part, they have remained quite private, so perhaps Peter feels uncomfortable with Meghan around, but in any case, this was a dark moment captured from that day. In our number 2 spot, we have Queen Elizabeth II waving to her father. Okay, I went back in the archives for this one. This photo honestly is super sad to see and quite dark, so I needed to add it to the list. In 1952, the Queen left for a trip to Kenya, and it was on this trip that she became Queen and learned of the death of her father, King George VI. In this photo we see right here, the Queen is looking at her father and waving to him for the last time. Whoa. Can you imagine if the last moment you had with your father was caught on camera? I'm sure this has been the case for a lot of people, but man, would that crumble me inside if that were to happen. It would be so sad, but also a gift as well. And when you think about it, the Queen looks quite happy in this photo, and so it's kinda a nice thought to think that perhaps one of the last moments that the King had with his daughter, she was smiling. Dark, but beautiful at the same time. Finally, in our number 1 spot, we have Prince Andrew at the funeral. Arguably one of the darkest last photos of one of the darkest royal family members, Prince Andrew is seen walking with his siblings and the new king from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey. He looks as one would expect one to look when their parent passes away, but it's hard to not look at him and see an aura of possibly someone who was involved with the horrendous crimes that were led by Jeffrey Epstein. After the public found out about Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey and a lot of the suspicious activity that didn't get cleared up after Prince Andrew did an interview on the accusations, the prince resigned from his public roles, and the Queen herself removed his honorary military affiliations and royal charitable patronages in January 2022. Prince Andrew lobbied very hard to stop Charles from becoming king. Apparently Prince Andrew doesn't get on with King Charles III very well, so that's very interesting. Anyways, it's hard not to see a picture of him and immediately think, dark.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Victorian memorials. I'm a sucker for dark history, and when it comes to the Victorian era, there is nothing more grim, honestly. Deadly dresses, the great stink, rats everywhere. It's a dangerous time. The life expectancy was of course a lot shorter than it is today. So you really had to hold on to those you loved, right? But this is a time where we don't have iPhones, we don't have Facebook just randomly showing you memories. Remember this? Like, no, stop. So how do you remember a loved one after they've passed away? Well, Victorian mourning jewelry, that's how. In the 1750s, it would be normal to carry with you a gold locket with hair from your past lover. It's, yeah, a little locket of hair. How cool is that? Creepy? A little bit creepy. It was often braided or neatly folded. It wasn't just a ball of hair stuffed in a locket. Although it wasn't not that either, right? It was pretty gross. During Queen Victoria's reign, she would often wear mourning jewelry. She made the locket of hair cool, dare I say. She made it popular. After the death of Albert, she went into a horrible depression. She wore mourning clothes for decades and decades afterwards. That's why you see the Victorian era and everyone's wearing black. Everyone looks all grim. It's because they just followed suit. They just wore what the Queen was wearing. Bracelets, necklaces, rings. The enamel of the rings also depends on the type of death that came prior, or the type of mourning that you're doing. White enamel represented death of an unmarried woman. Pearls represented tears. Turquoise meant that you were thinking of them on that day. And eventually pendants with hair became a next step. I'm a fan of mourning jewelry. I like that idea. I wish I knew this sooner. I wish I knew this 10 years ago. I'd be like, oh, my eyebrow piercing? Yeah, it's to mourn my mother. That's why I got it. Sad and rad. Boink. There you go. Number 9, Detroit Ice Fountain. Located on Washington Boulevard, the Detroit Ice Fountain was quite the hazard. A spectacle, but a hazard nonetheless. Back in the early 1900s, a fountain was the talk of the town during colder months. Believe it or not, it's how bored people were, I guess. The water jets would run all year long, so in turn this fountain would freeze and pile up, and then freeze and pile up again and again. Eventually this thing reached up to 60 feet tall, made of pure ice, right on Washington Boulevard. This was so dangerous, yeah, shifting ice, dangling 60 feet above your head on the way to work. Literally tons of ice cracking above your head. The tradition has now moved to Belle Island, thankfully, so now you can safely observe said ice trees. Just, you know, maybe not in the middle of the street anymore. Number 8, adhesive bras. Back in 1949, Life magazine released an article that caught everybody's attention, obviously. May 16th, 1948, the article read, "For 5,000 years, clothes have been draped, tied, buttoned, pinned, and buckled on the human form. This year, for the first time in history, they will be glued on." Bam. How? How did they do it? They changed the game. Could this be? We're gluing on shoes and pants now? Let's do it. Inventor Charles L. Langs changed the game, or so we thought, in 1949. He made bra cups that would stick onto you with adhesive. So just a ring of glue. There you go. This special glue, this adhesive, was promised to leave behind no residue, and it was also supposed to be painless. Yet at the same time, it was supposed to stay glued on, even if you were to jump into a pool from 10 feet high. How? That was the sell. No way. Well, Langs ended up selling the company to Textron because it didn't work. The product ultimately failed because the adhesive needed to be applied every single time you wore said cups. Nobody wants to do that. We're not putting on toothpaste on our bras every morning and sticking them on. And again, they barely even worked, so yeah, none of these, thank you. I'm good. Glue on pants? That'd be sick. Till then, we're not trying that. Number 7, German mascots. German history is of course dark, so dark that YouTube won't even allow us to say certain words about certain people from that time. But we do our best. We like to rhyme, that's how we trick them. For today's list, I thought we'd take a look at Germany's fad of taking photos with polar bear mascots. Yeah, apparently that was a thing. Here in Toronto, we like to pose up next to the raptor or jay, the blue jay. It's always fun. Dap them up, it's always a good time. These photos are part of the teddy bar collection. They span from the First World War to the early 70s. The German bear mascot remained throughout history, but the company surrounding the polar bear mascot of course changed drastically throughout the years, and it's really grim to look at. You see photos of a smiling mascot next to Yahtzee soldiers, and then the next page you see the same German mascot, but 40 years ago. You know what I mean? It's odd, you're like, ugh. It's like seeing the Blue Jay guy back in the 1800s. You're like, what were you doing? Many believe this craze began after 2 polar bears arrived at the Berlin Zoo back in the 1920s. That's where it all kicked off. Because of course it was a major tourist attraction. But these suits, we can't forget, were first worn of course by natives for ritual practices, specifically the native people of Pacific Northwest. Romania as well, dancers would wear real bear skins as part of a pre-Christian tradition. It was meant to drive away the forces of evil. Or just pose up next to Yahtzee soldiers. That's where we're at recently. Number 6, Reindeer Games. June 1941, the Germans were attacking the Soviet Union, and it was one of the biggest attacks, of course, in history. Britain and US had to send weapons, supplies, anything really just to keep them afloat, just to keep them in the fight. Now they sent these supplies through the Arctic Circle, that was the only route, but of course it was littered with U-boats. Thankfully, the British HMS Trident was there to watch the waters, and in turn the Soviets were able to fight on. So as a gift, as a thank you, the Soviets sent the captain of the Trident, the World War II submarine, a live reindeer. Yep, for the submarine, you know, just a reindeer for the sub. Doesn't make any sense, right? I agree. The British had to accept because it was ill-mannered if they didn't, so they had to keep a 6-foot-tall, real-life reindeer on a sub. Her name was Pollyanna. They brought her on board through a torpedo tube. Imagine being in battle and then having to deal with this after. You're like, guy, we don't need this right now, please. She was a crew member for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, imagine the smell? And she slept better than most. She shared a room in the captain's quarters. Horrible. Finally, the Trident returned home to Britain, and our leading lady was donated immediately to the Regent Park Zoo. Yeah, they didn't keep her on the sub. Weird, right? Number 5, Alfred Hitchcock and the MGM Lion. We're on part 3 now, so things are gonna get a little more bizarre. I'll veer more into the weird, gladly. Like this photo, for example, from 1958, taken by Clarence Sinclair Bull. The photo appears to be, well, it doesn't appear to be, it's Alfred Hitchcock serving tea to Leo the lion. The famous MGM lion, that's him. That's the guy. I want an autograph right now. He loves suspense and tea, who would have thought? North by Northwest was the only film Hitchcock did with MGM, and there's actually a rumor that he directed The Lion's Roar for the MGM intro. But that of course is nonsense, because you can't direct a lion. Yeah, just a little more lion-like. Awesome, thanks Leo. Let's take lunch. We're killing it. No way, that didn't happen. There have been 7 MGM lions in total, but Leo was known to be the most friendly. He's still in the logo today. He's an OG, he's made it. But again, back in the 1950s, it's hard to say what it really was like on set. You know, like it's still a lion, and it's the 50s. I don't think we have a lot of laws and stuff. It was probably a really rough time for Leo. Number 4, the Hobble Skirt. Just from this 1910 headline alone, I'm glad we don't have Hobble Skirts anymore. Although maybe they might make a comeback, we'll see. The headline reads, the Hobble Skirt is the latest freak in women's fashions. Skirts that are so tight around the ankle that locomotion is seriously impeded and speed is impossible. What a pitch. Doesn't that sound like a bad time already? Sounds like you're gonna be late for everything, honestly. French designer Paul Poirier made these to free the bust whilst also shackling the legs. To keep it a little, you know, keep it classy. You know, what's more classy than shuffling around all day long and being late? Nothing. Love the practicality on this one. Thanks, Paul. So despite how ridiculous and unsafe the Hobble Skirt looks and acts, only the wealthy could afford such a thing. Damn it, we're missing out. We'll get them next time. Guess I'll just stick with my jeans like a fool. Middle and lower class women wore skirts with slits or buttons. They could actually walk around. Imagine that, eh? What a weird concept. Hobble skirts luckily didn't last, but every now and then I sense a comeback, you know? With the Kardashians, I'm like, that's close. That's close to a hobble skirt. Locomotion is seriously impeded. What a sell. Number 3, Gloria Steinem. Back in 1963, the Playboy Club in New York City was one of Hugh Hefner's greatest accomplishments at the time, of course. The club was the talk of the town until Gloria Steinem came along. See, Gloria was a feminist writer. She created Miss Magazine back in 1972, but her career began much earlier, around the 60s. See, she got a job as one of these Playboy bunnies and worked at the club undercover, secretly taking notes on how this key holders only establishment was actually operating, you know, behind the pages. The staff were these young women, the bunnies of course, they had to wear black bodysuits, the puffy white tails, the whole getup, and at age 28, Gloria worked undercover for 3 weeks. The piece she released after, appropriately titled A Bunny's Tale, got so much attention that it kickstarted her freelance career. It made her a feminist icon to this day. This photo of Gloria undercover shows you the comfortable work outfits that she had to endure. That's horrible. It's all dark too. You can't even see what's going on. People are smoking inside. It's like Peaky Blinders. It's horrible. I don't think she had non-slips on. You know what I mean? In a collection of her writings, Gloria reflects on the undercover piece, saying how it has now outlived all the Playboy clubs, both here and abroad. That was before Hefner passed away in 2017. I'm sure she didn't mean outlive literally by this statement. But she also did, you know? Number 2, Stalin Photoshop. Deepfakes are getting out of control. It's insane. Modern technology is really making it hard to tell what's real and what's not. I'm falling for a lot of things online lately. I'm starting to feel like an old man, I'm not gonna lie. Photoshop is also an essential now for any project. It's probably why you clicked this video. You saw the thumb and you're like, what's this? Photoshop. Back in 1939, a photo of Stalin was published and he looks great. Guy looks amazing, some would say too good. He was touching up photos as far back as 1939 to make himself look more powerful, more healthy. But even if you got a photo with him, there's a chance you would be digitally removed later on. Like Nikolai Yevtsov. Yeah, the leader of the NKVD, he was in a photo with Stalin, but around 1937, Nikolai was responsible for orders that had over 1 million people arrested. And to make matters worse, half of them were executed for crimes against the state. So it wasn't ideal, of course, to be in a photo with Nikolai. He was denounced, imprisoned, and died in 1940, so Stalin had him erased and replaced digitally in that photo. This man was ahead of his time. Even today we're replacing actors in movies with different actors. And you wouldn't even know it. And finally, number 1, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Yes, we all remember hearing about this at one point, even if you wanted to or not. Bill Clinton talking about not having relations with that woman. Yeah, back when we had to download music on LimeWire, this would just pop up out of nowhere and blow your eardrums out. This was a huge scandal. This was that scandal. It was 1998. Clinton White House intern Monica Lewinsky was 22 years old and they had a relation from 1995 to 1997. Lewinsky said she hooked up with Bill 9 different times at the White House. Of course, you have to count. You're at the White House, obviously, you're keeping note. And apparently, according to her schedule, Hillary Clinton was also at the White House for at least 7 of those days. Hey, big yikes. Whenever I see this photo, I wish I was alive to see this unfold in real time. I mean, I was alive, but I was, you know what I mean. Number 10, Go Pills. Introducing Go Pills, the pill that keeps you up for 40 hours straight. What could possibly go wrong? When the government tried creating these new pills, the right idea was in mind. Or so we think. Overnight workers, military, maybe you need to cram 3 days of studying in one night. You name it. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, was supposed to have your back. What happened? The Air Force has around 100 fatal crashes on record because of fatigued pilots. So US military was actively trying to create a solution for these physically demanding jobs. The closest that we have now to these Go Pills are something called modafinil, which is a narcotic approved by the Air Force to combat said fatigue, but it's not public yet, of course, obviously. Do you think these government Go Pills will ever make it to the public? I mean, I think coffee makes people crazy enough in the mornings. I'm all set personally. I'm on like coffee number 4. I'm jazzed up right now. Number 9, the heart attack gun. Sounds like a pretty calm weapon right there. The CIA had this weapon and it was more of a dart gun than anything, but you know, heart attack gun sounds pretty on the nose for this list. It shot a frozen dart filled with a specific toxin that, you guessed it, gave you a heart attack. Pretty James Bond, right? It was frozen so that the dart would ideally melt away after it's done its damage. You know, destroying all the evidence, right? It's like some icicle killer stuff right there. That's some next level. There we go. It took me 17 seconds to remember what an icicle was called. I was like, what are those long drippy frozen things? The icicles. The CIA was really into poisons during the Cold War and apparently darts. Match made in heaven. The public caught wind of all this thanks to Senator Frank Church, and when Congress decided to look into where these tax dollars were going, they found a plethora of illegal methods used by not only the CIA, but also the NSA and the FBI and the IRS. A lot of letters coming in, a lot of sketchy letters. Frozen darts, that's insane. That's a confusing way to go out. You'd have no idea what happened. You'd be like, ugh, brr. Ow. Like, it'd be that fast. That's crazy. Number 8, Project Iceworm. Ooh, speaking of cold, here we go. Back in the 1960s, under the Greenland ice sheet, the US Army started to build a mobile nuclear missile launch site, okay? It was codenamed Project Iceworm. It's a pretty fun name because it's cold and underground. We get it, right? Nice. The idea was that they would build the station close enough so that they could hit targets within the Soviet Union, all secretly, right? That was the whole idea. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Sentry that had to be done first. This is the top secret, sketchy stuff. Can't just hit the road with a few shovels, you gotta make sure it's livable first. Camp Sentry was a network of underground tunnels and places for workers to hang out, like a kitchen, a hall, supply rooms, communication center, all stuff like that. It was a supply camp. You know, whatever you imagine, it was that. There was also a nuclear power plant. That's the most important part, to keep everything active, right? This was kept from the Danish government for 7 years. A secret nuclear power plant for 7 years. Yeah, we don't like those. But in 1966, the project was canceled because of shifting ice. Or at least that's what they say. No, it's definitely shifting ice. The whole place is melted by now. Number 7, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. It happened very fast. This feels like yesterday. I remember this happening online. I was actually quite worried about it. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, well, dare I say, a good hacker, for lack of a better word. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. You know, they're not villains. They're just like, oh, check this file, gotcha. They're nice, that's key. We need that. That's the difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims in this leak. All their names, addresses, birth date, phone numbers, emails, even photos, you name it. Things you don't want people knowing, let alone third parties online. It's now out there. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak, so that's comforting to go to sleep to, knowing. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from a software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. He said, nope, false. Although he conceded that it is still possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. It wasn't them, it was just their weak security. Nice, we love that. Just my photo, just in someone's Google Doc. I'm like, awesome. I don't want anything out there. I don't want my Google search history out there. That sounds suspicious. Number 6, the Space Cube. In honor of Jordan Peele's new space movie coming out called Nope, we have to include some alien cover-ups in this government list. Not too long ago, this spinning cube-looking drone, hopefully drone, was spotted over Missouri, and then only a couple hours later, it was seen again 700 miles away. That's a pretty far distance. That's a fast travel time. What's your secret? 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, when this caught his attention. It was a sunny day, so the light reflected off the cube and it caught his eye. But then a day later, another guy, 30-year-old Justin Johnston, he saw the same exact thing in the sky. He saw it while he was driving home. The light and the reflection, same thing, caught his eye. At first, I thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were odd, he said. Well, it sounds like whatever this thing is, military aircraft, drone, whatever the case, it's pretty fast. Maybe they're filming Top Gun 3, who knows? No spoilers. Number 5, CER Sea Island. Some islands are forbidden, like Heard Island. They're home to animals and wildlife that the government refuses to let humans be part of, which is sketchy in its own way. A lot of Jurassic Park vibes over there. But when it comes to CER Sea Island, near Iceland, again, always Iceland, hiding secret government projects, well, CER Sea Island is a brand new island. We love it. Literally, this island formed from a volcanic eruption back in 1963, so scientists are using this fresh face of Earth to study what it looks like to not have humans in the picture for a change. Yeah, we have seed vaults, a forbidden island. These projects make people uneasy, hence why the government tries to keep them low-key. That is until I come out and then loudly announce it, and then tell you to hit that like button. Awesome. Number 4, WikiLeaks war logs. Companies have to live somewhere, right? We're a film studio in Toronto, we're a place. We're not just a bunker, right? We're like an establishment. There's windows, we have a fridge, lots of coffee. We're okay. But where do places like WikiLeaks work? It's probably a sketchy establishment. It's probably nothing like Google, you know what I'm saying? Not a lot of beanbag chairs going on at WikiLeaks. Probably just one chair that everyone shares. Just one guy. It's literally just one guy. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. This is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Julian Assange was the front runner for this whole operation. So literally, like I said, it was one guy. His hard drive is stored in this bunker behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators. So you're not getting in, pal. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004. It's now one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraqi war logs out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics. Yeah, which is not great. That's borderline That's a big leak. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. Yeah, it's hard stuff. Number 3, military weapons. Getting into the alien stuff, here we go. Psycho-electronic weapons. Yeah, apparently we're in a DC comic now. We have ice darts, ice rays. What's going on here? The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these military psycho-electronic weapons was when he received documents via Yahoo. Of all the places to get documents, you're like, oh, this is 10 years old. Originally, he had filed the Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. He was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right. But instead he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. He's like, this is not what I asked for. What is this? Open. The guy gets a zip file back in return and it's called EM Effects on Human Body. How do you not open that, right? And that's exactly what he did. He opened this file because, of course, and in it he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. Muscle quaking, body pain, just shivering, just your body shuts down, it's horrible. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams, so it's not all bad, it's just kind of not right, unethical. This was clearly sent by mistake. Nobody should ever know about any of these weapons, these super dream weapons. I don't even know what's going on there. The only emails I get are from student loans. Those ones are not a mistake. Those ones I will keep deleting. Number 2, inner armor. Not to be confused with your inner ninja. It's also pretty mighty. We've all wanted to be a superhero at some point. Okay, I'm always late. I would love super speed. Any day, that'd be great. Well, DARPA's Inner Armor project almost made a dream come true. It was the Pentagon's way of creating super soldiers. Yeah, like Iron Man, they were literally working on this. Scientists use animals as a reference for these new abilities, literally like from a Marvel movie. They're studying the DNA of the stellar sea lion because it can reduce blood flow away from organs if need be, in order to reduce oxygen demand. So now we're studying that to try and make, I don't know, people like Atlanteans? Where are we going here? That would be sweet, just Aquaman with a tactical vest and a spear. Okay, that's sure. Dr. Michael Callahan, who is in charge of running the operation, he says the goal was to make soldiers kill-proof against disease, chemical weapons, radioactive weapons, harsh weather conditions, you name it, all that good stuff. Pretty much invincible. Now, this was back in 2007, and of course in 2014, Barack Obama announced that the United States was still building Iron Man. So maybe they're close. Maybe they haven't done it yet. Who knows? Honestly, I'm seeing videos every day of like these guys on hoverboards whipping down New York. We're so close to the Green Goblin in real life. We're f***ed. Or like the water peer guy, he like uses the water to float. That's like 2 villains. It's 2 villains right there in real life. And finally, number 1, MK Ultra. We have to finish with a mind control project. It's the only way, of course. MK Ultra was a secret CIA project that lasted from 1953 to 1973. It's a long time. They ran hundreds of experiments to US citizens. They gave them illicit substances and other narcotics, just horrible stuff, all in attempts to crack mind control. Or as they call it, information gathering. Mind control. It's definitely mind control. In the 50s and 60s, around the Cold War, the United States believed that the Soviets, Chinese, and or North Korean agents were all using mind control in the war. I mean, how else could you explain brainwashed prisoners of war in Korea, right? Nothing to do with what they're doing to them. Sure. The program had subjects take LSD, hallucinogens, paralytics, electric shock therapy, horrible stuff, just being put through the absolute worst, all in places like universities or hospitals or even prisons, right? You have no idea this stuff's happening. The happenings of these projects weren't fully known to the public until years after it ended. But the agency destroyed most MK documents back in 1973 when the whistle was blown, so we think we know, but in reality, we only know little to what happened during MK Ultra.
Number 10, the nuclear shadows of Hiroshima. With Oppenheimer out in theaters, why not start off this list about the bombing of Hiroshima? For those of you who don't know, on the 6th and 9th of August 1945, the United States detonated 2 atomic bombs over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. The aerial bombings together killed between 129,000 and 226,000 people, most of whom were civilians, and remain the only use of nuclear weapons in an armed conflict. Now, for all the people who lost their lives, only a nuclear shadow remained. When the bomb detonated at 1,900 feet above the city center of Hiroshima, the subsequent explosion caused temperatures of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit to annihilate nearly everything within 1,600 feet of the bomb's blast zone. Almost anything and anyone within a mile was destroyed. The bomb's light and heat were so extreme that they bleached the city's exposed surfaces, except in places where an unsuspecting person shielded the building or sidewalk or bridge from the blast with their own body in their final moments moments alive. It's truly disturbing that people were just enjoying their lives and it was gone in an instant, and that you can physically see that with the shadows. Number 9. Radium Girls. The Radium Girls were female factory workers who contracted radiation poisoning from painting radium dials, watch dials with hands with self-luminous paint. The incident occurred at 3 facilities in the United States, one in Orange, New Jersey beginning around 1917, one in Ottawa, Illinois beginning in the early 1920s, and one in Waterbury, Connecticut also in the 1920s. After being told that the paint was harmless, the women in each facility ingested deadly amounts of radium after being instructed to point their brushes on their lips in order to give them a fine tip, and some also painted their fingernails, faces, and teeth with the glowing substance. The prolonged exposure to the radium caused dental pain, loose teeth, lesions, and ulcers, and the failure of tooth extractions to heal were some of these conditions. Many of the women later began to develop anemia, bone fractures, and caused their vertebrae to collapse and their jaws to swell up and fall off. And their lives were slowly ended in agony while battling cancer. The photo here shows one of these victims, and it's truly heartbreaking. Number 8. Crime scene message. Called the lipstick killer, William Herons liked to take the lives of women. On June 5, 1945, Josephine Ross was discovered deceased in her home. She had been pierced repeatedly with a blade and was clutching dark-colored hairs in her hands. Nearly a year later, Frances Brown was discovered deceased with a blade lodged in her neck and a bullet wound, and what they found at the crime scene was scary. Written in lipstick on the wall, a message said, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Now, the man responsible, William Herons, was caught soon after the message was discovered and was convicted for ending the lives of several people. At the time of his death, William was reportedly Illinois' longest-serving prisoner, having spent 65 years in prison. He spent the later years of his sentence at the Dixon Correctional Center in Dixon, Illinois. Though he remained imprisoned until his death, William had recanted his confession and claimed to be the victim of coercive interrogation and police brutality. So who really knows the truth, but that message is haunting, and I can't even imagine what was going through the heads of the first responders who found it. Number 7. The Exorcism of Anneliese Michael. Anneliese Michael was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death. When she was younger, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she'd become intolerant of various religious objects and began to hear voices. After the taking of psychiatric medications for 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Anneliese and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism, and while rejected at first, 2 priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priests began conducting exorcism sessions, and the parents stopped consulting doctors. A total of 67 exorcism sessions, 1 or 2 each week, lasting up to 4 hours each, were performed over approximately 10 months in 1975 and 1976. None of these worked or improved her condition, and it resulted in her dying of malnutrition at the age of 23 in 1976, weighing just 68 pounds. Now, this is a ghastly photo of her when she was possessed, and I can't imagine what that poor girl went through.
And we're starting off the list with the Space Shuttle Challenger. This image here is the last photo taken of the crew right before they took off. They never made it back home. The Challenger was a NASA shuttle, and it had 7 crew members. Their mission was to release a communications satellite and study Halley's Comet. The shuttle took off on January 28, 1986, but just 73 seconds into their flight, the spacecraft disintegrated. The explosion was due to a problem with one of the rocket boosters. It was cold that day, and the rubber O-rings that helped seal the joints in the booster didn't work well because of the low temperature. This caused a leak of hot gas, which led to the explosion. Now, every astronaut knows the risks going into a flight. It's not a job you get into and expect to be 100% safe, but at the same time, it's tough looking at an image like this knowing that they were about to die. Number 9, the Andes flight disaster. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 took off on October 13th, 1972, carrying 5 crew members and 40 passengers, each members of the Old Christian Club Rugby Union team. This here is the last photo taken on the plane before it crashed in the Andes. Astonishingly though, 27 of the 45 passengers survived the initial crash. There are a series of photographs of these survivors posing next to the crashed plane. It's a tragic case, as many people did die, but in a lot of these pictures, you see them smiling. They look just grateful to still be alive. But there's a darker side to this as well. Out of these 27 survivors, only 16 made it out alive, got back home, having been rescued 72 days later. And in order to survive, they had to make a pretty grisly decision. They resorted to cannibalizing the dead in order to survive. That certainly adds a dark layer to some of these images, but in the end, it is a miracle that 16 of these passengers survived the ordeal. This is one of a series of pictures snapped by 22-year-old Darsh Patel. He was hiking with friends through the Opshwa Preserve in New Jersey when he spotted this black bear and started snapping pictures. In the series of photos, you see this 300-pound black bear moving towards the camera. The friends started to back away, but it continued getting closer, so they decided to separate, running in different directions. When they regrouped later though, Patel wasn't there. 2 hours later, authorities discovered his lifeless body, having been mauled to death by the bear, which was lingering close by. The bear was shot by police, who discovered human remains inside of it. Being rushed at by a bear, one of my biggest fears. I can only imagine how terrifying the last moments of his life must have been here. Number 7, Christopher McCandless. This is the last photo taken of Christopher McCandless, a photo he took himself. On September 6th, 1992, the decomposing body of Christopher was found in a bus he'd been living in just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska. Journal entries by Christopher made it evident that he'd likely died about 19 days earlier. He'd decided to leave civilization behind and live off the grid. He spent 113 days living off the land, using the bus as his shelter. After this time, he decided to head back to civilization. But he was unable, as the river he had crossed was much higher and swifter than it was when he initially ventured in. He returned back and posted an SOS note on the bus reading, "Attention, possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you. Chris McCandless." It was determined that he had died of starvation. Looking at this image, you can see how gaunt he looks. Apparently he was only 60-something pounds when he was actually discovered. And we are starting off this list with the ghost of Worsted Church. So back in August of 1975, there's this guy named Peter Bertholdt. Just your average Joe, right? He's out with his family taking a stroll around the Church of St. Mary's in Norfolk. Nothing unusual, just a family day out. Peter's got his camera, it snaps a picture of his wife Diane sitting on a church bench, deep in prayer mode. Seems pretty ordinary. Peter, being the typical family man, claims there was absolutely nobody behind his wife when he took that picture. Fast forward a few months, they're hanging out with some friends, showing off their holiday slides, and boom, one of their friends points at a photo and asks, "Hey Diane, who's that sitting behind you?" Cue the collective confusion. Peter and Diane squint at the photo, and lo and behold, there's this white figure lurking behind Diane, almost like a woman in an old-fashioned bonnet. Now, they're not exactly the type to jump to ghostly conclusions, but when they saw that eerie figure on the projector screen, they were a little bit disturbed. They decide to investigate, take the photo back to the church. The local vicar, always up for a good ghost story, tells them about the legend of the White Lady. Apparently, she's this ghostly woman who pops up when people need healing. And at the time that photo was taken, Diane was dealing with some health problems and was on antibiotics. Coincidence? Maybe. Spooky? Definitely. At our number 9 spot, we have the Madonna of Bachelors Grove. So it's 1991. Judy Fells, a former member of the Ghost Research Society, decided to check out the infamous Bachelors Grove Cemetery in Illinois. Armed with a camera, she started snapping pictures, thinking she was alone in the graveyard. Little did she know, she wasn't. When the photos developed, Judy spotted something bizarre. There, on one of the gravestones, was a woman. Shown in this picture here. She appeared relaxed, slightly leaning forward as if gently rocking. Judy hadn't seen anyone while she was taking the pictures. Reports of this woman in white date back to the 70s. She's not your typical ghost either. Sometimes she's seen alone, just chilling on a tombstone. Other times she's holding something that many over the years have believed to be a baby. And it's not just in that one spot that her ghost is spotted. People claim to have seen her all around the graveyard. Next on the list is the photograph of the Weem ghost. So our story begins in the small town of Weem in England. In 1995, a terrible fire ravaged a building in town, destroying it completely. What caught everyone's attention, though, was a photo taken by local resident Tony O'Reilly during the fire. The picture captured a young girl standing amidst the flames, seemingly unharmed. The witnesses claimed there was no girl at the scene. No living girl, that is. Some said the ghostly figure looked a lot like a girl who died in a fire at the same spot in 1677. Her name was Jane Churn. According to legend, her ghost occasionally appeared in the town. Experts examined the photograph, attempting to debunk it, but there was no conclusive evidence. Tony O'Reilly, the man behind the lens, was said to be a straightforward and honest guy. He insisted that he hadn't noticed the ghostly figure when he took the photo and that he hadn't doctored it whatsoever. Number 7, the Brown Lady of Ryham Hall. Back in 1936, Captain Hubert C. Provand snapped a pic in Radium Hall, Norfolk. It would go on to be one of the most well-known ghost photographs of all time. He happened to capture the ghostly figure of an entity known as the Brown Lady. According to the story, she's Lady Dorothy Walpole, a woman who got the short end of the stick back in the 18th century. She had an affair. Hubby found out, decided to lock her away in a dark corner of the mansion. She got hit with smallpox in 1726 and died a pretty miserable death. Visitors and staff at Radium Hall have claimed to bump into this ghostly lady over the years. Some hear her footsteps like she's climbing the stairs. Others feel a sudden chill even when it's warm. And then there are those who swear they've seen her, the full-blown ghostly apparition, something like in this photograph here. Next, we have the famous Newbie church ghost photo. Back in 1963, a reverend named Kenneth F. Lord was snapping pictures inside the Church of Christ the Consoler, located at Newbie Hall in North Yorkshire, UK. And as he snapped away, nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first, but fast forward to when he develops the film, and there's this bizarre photo showing up. In the picture, clear as day, there's this semi-translucent, almost monk-like figure just hanging out at the church altar. Again, Reverend Lord claimed he was all by himself in the church when he took the shot. No one else was around, so who the heck was this phantom monk? Totally baffled, Reverend Lord decided to get some experts involved. They checked out the photo and swore up and down that it hadn't been messed with. As to who these experts were, that info's not really known. There's a good chance these supposed experts were of the self-proclaimed variety, but creepy picture regardless. And at our number 5 spot, we have the Sefton Church ghost photograph. Alright, so in Merseyside, England sits Sefton Church, just a hop and skip north of Liverpool. Now, back in 1999, a photographer named Brad Steiger was out there, camera in hand. There was another photographer right next to him, both of them doing their thing. While they were clicking away, Steiger managed to capture something strange. In one of his shots, clear as day once again, there's a figure that looks like a priest. Not weird to see a priest in a church, but again, there were apparently only 2 people in the church at the time, neither of which were dressed as priests. No fancy setups, no eerie lighting here, just a random day, 2 guys with cameras, and a photo of a phantom priest. There's also a pub next door to the church called the Punch Bowl, which is supposedly haunted. Maybe the ghostly father in this picture heads next door to have a couple sneaky drinks now and again. Probably what I'd do if I were a ghost. I imagine it would get pretty boring after a while. In fact, I think that's what creeps me out the most about the idea of ghosts. Not seeing one, but actually becoming one, like trapped in this eternal monotonous prison, spending your days repeating the last moments of your death, and then occasionally appearing ominously in people's amateur photographs. Like, yeah. Something to look forward to. Number 4, St. Botolph's Church Ghost. In 1982, a photographer, Chris Brackley, snapped a photo of St. Botolph's Church, not suspecting anything unusual, but when the film was developed, a mysterious figure appeared by the balcony. This one is a bit harder to spot, but just kind of take a close look in the top right-hand corner there. Brackley swore he hadn't seen anyone there when he took the shot. The photo underwent rigorous analysis, ruling out double exposure or equipment glitches. Brackley's gear was working fine, yet the unexplained figure was there. A few years passed, and Brackley was then contacted by a builder who had worked on a crypt restoration at the same church. And during the restoration, a wall was knocked down, revealing a disturbed coffin, and inside was a woman whose face that the builder said eerily resembled the figure captured in Brackley's photo. Next up, we have the Coventry Spectre. In 1985, there was this prayer meeting at St. Mary's Guildhall in Coventry, England. Members of the Coventry Freeman organization gathered for a prayer meeting. They were your typical group, all suited up and bowing their heads in prayer. Now, the odd part happened later when the photos from the meeting were developed. Among the familiar faces was an unfamiliar one, a figure distinctively dressed in a long robe. This wasn't your average attendee attire, everyone else was in modern suits and ties, but there was this mysterious robed figure in the top left-hand corner. No one in the group remembered anyone dressing like that during the meeting, and what really struck people was the height of this figure. They were noticeably tall, not the kind of person you'd easily overlook in a room. Alright, in second place we have a demon in the hospital. The story goes that a nurse working her shift at some unnamed hospital snapped this pic. She'd taken a picture of the security camera, and in the shot you get this patient chilling in bed, and, well, not really chilling, I'll get to that part later, but anyway, he's in bed, and right on top of them, there's something straight out of your worst nightmares. A demon, at least that's what it looks like. It's your classic devil type of vibe, horns on its head, legs that resemble something almost goat-like. The entity apparently popped up briefly, and what's even creepier is that just a few hours after it appeared, the patient in the bed passed away. Is this a genuine demon caught on camera? Grim Reaper's demonic cousin playing a visit, patiently awaiting to drag its next victim into the fiery depths? I don't know. Why don't you let us know in the comments. Finally, we have the Pine Hill Cemetery Ghost. In Pine Hill Cemetery, a series of photographs captured by Tyler Karanasios brought attention to the possibility of paranormal activity in this quiet burial ground. What initially seemed like routine snapshots changed when he took a closer look at the pictures. As Karanasios enhanced the images, an eerie figure, almost like a woman wearing a veil, appeared in the background. He hadn't noticed anything when he was actually taking the pictures. It only showed up later. Pine Hill Cemetery in Hollis, New Hampshire has been rumored to be a hotspot for paranormal experiences. If you're thinking the figure is just a headstone, by the way, there was another photo taken during the day which shows that there is no headstone in that spot.
Number 6, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The Dyatlov Pass Incident was an event in which 9 Soviet hikers died in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd, 1959, under uncertain circumstances. This creepy photo shows the determined group traversing in the harsh terrain just before they met their fate on the night of February 1st. Now, what happened? The experienced trekking group from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, had established a camp in the Russian SFSR of the Soviet Union. Now, overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tent and flee the campsite while inadequately dressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. After the group's bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that 6 of them had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had died by physical trauma. One victim had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest trauma, and another had a small crack in his skull. 4 of the bodies were found laying in running water in a creek, and 3 of those 4 had damaged soft tissue of the head and face, and 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, 1 had a missing tongue, and 1 had missing eyebrows. No one's really too sure what happened to them and why it happened either, but it's just strange. Number 5. Shell-shocked soldier. Before shell shock was called war neurosis or post-traumatic stress disorder, and before experts actually began to understand the psychological trauma that the war could cause, veterans of World War I were largely left to fight their own mental health battles. Now, shell shock is a word that originated during World War I to describe the type of post-traumatic stress disorder that many soldiers experienced during the war. It is a reaction to the intensity of the bombardment and fighting that produced a helplessness which could manifest as panic, fear, flight, or an inability to reason, sleep, talk, or walk. During the war, the concept of shell shock was poorly defined, and cases of shell shock could be interpreted as either physical or psychological injury. Now, the creepy historical image of the shell-shocked soldier seen here starkly highlights the horror of the war and what being stuck in the trenches during the Battle of Flers-Courset could do to a man. Captured in September 1916, this photo was taken years before World War I even ended. By the time the end came, countless other men would suffer a similar fate. Number 4. The Frozen Man of Mount Everest. In May 1996, mountain climber Beck Weathers and his team attempted to complete their ascent of Mount Everest. Although they only had a small stretch to go, Beck came down with a bad case of snow blindness, and after getting stuck in a harrowing blizzard with a wind chill of 100 degrees below zero, he fell into a hypothermic coma. Frostbite set on his nose and hands, both of which were later amputated. Miraculously, he managed to survive, walked back to camp, and was airlifted for treatment. Initially, I thought I was in a dream, Beck later recalled. Then I saw how badly frozen my right hand was, and that helped bring me around to reality. Now, for those of you who don't know, climbing Mount Everest is extremely dangerous, and it's a miracle that he's alive. Number 3. The Human Dolls. Anatoly Moskvin is a Russian former journalist, college professor, and self-dubbed necropolist with expert knowledge of cemeteries. Now, this man was a little strange as he loved collecting dolls. He had many, and the figures he had resembled antique dolls. They wore fine and varied clothing, some wore knee-high boots, and others had makeup over their faces Anatoly had covered in fabric. He had also hidden their hands in fabric, except these dolls were not dolls, they were mummified corpses of human girls. Yeah, you heard that right. He was obsessed with digging up the dead and making dolls out of their corpses. After making his human dolls, he kept them in his home as his companions and lovers. I kissed her once, then again, Anatoly wrote about one of his dolls, made from the body of a young girl. Police finally caught him in 2011 after years of increasing suspicion at the growing number of discarded graves in his home city. When the police searched his home, they found 26 life-size dolls, or rather mummified corpses, scattered throughout. When police moved one of the bodies, it played music as if on cue, as inside the chests of many of the dolls, Anatoly had embedded music boxes. There were also photographs and plaques taken off the gravestones, doll-making manuals, and maps of local cemeteries strewn about the apartment. Police even discovered that the clothes worn by the mummified corpses were the clothes in which they were buried. Now, this is just overall disturbing. I just can't. Number 2. Michael Rockefeller. Michael Rockefeller, the son of New York Governor and soon-to-be U.S. Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, disappeared somewhere in Papua New Guinea in the early 1960s. Seen here smiling on his first trip there in May 1960, you wouldn't be aware of his fate. In November 1961, he traveled to the jungles of New Guinea to spend time with the native Asmat tribes when he went missing. Despite a 2-week search and a witness who supposedly saw him swimming in the ocean, his body was never found. A theory of what happened is that he was eaten by people, as the Asmat tribes were involved in that practice and sometimes ended people's lives as a part of rituals. It's also been said that his boat overturned near the Asmat region of the island. The boy swam to the shore to look for help, and that's it. No one ever saw him again. But at least some members of the local tribes have told stories indicating that Michael's life was ended upon reaching the shore, and his body was cut up and the parts were handed out as gruesome trophies. Regardless of what happened, it's just a sad situation overall. And coming in at number 1, one is human zoo. You think animal zoos are bad? Just wait until you hear about us humans putting other humans in a zoo. Human zoos were public displays of people, usually in so-called natural or primitive states. They were most prominent during the 19th and 20th centuries. In the 1870s, exhibitions of so-called exotic populations became popular throughout the Western world. Human zoos could be seen in many of Europe's largest cities, such as Paris, Hamburg, London, Milan, as well as American cities such as New York City and Chicago. Now, these photos were taken in 1904, where the US government imported 1,300 indigenous Filipinos from different tribes to display at the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. There's also one girl known as the Filipino Zoo Girl, and she was displayed at the Coney Island Zoo in 1904. She was a zoo attraction among the monkeys and lizards to show off the new US possessions in the Philippines. She was bound by ropes and visitors threw her peanuts, and it was just overall disgusting how they were treated.
Next up we have the Titanic. This is one of the last known photographs of the Titanic, taken while it was still afloat. Everyone knows the story here. This supposedly unsinkable ship totally sank. The Titanic disaster happened on April 15th, 1912. The Titanic was a big passenger ship known as unsinkable, but it hit an iceberg on its first voyage from England to America. The ship broke into two pieces and sank in the North Atlantic Ocean. Over 1,500 people died, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. The ship had safety measures like lifeboats, but there weren't enough for everyone on board. The crew didn't have proper training for emergencies, and communication was fairly limited. The iceberg was spotted too late, and the ship couldn't turn in time to avoid the collision. The cold water made survival hard for those who jumped into the ocean, leading to hypothermia and death within minutes. Number 5, we have George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. This is the last photograph snapped of these two mountain climbers right before they began their ascent of Mount Everest. They would never return. George Mallory and Sandy Irvine were British mountaineers who died during an expedition to Mount Everest in 1924. Mallory was an experienced climber, and he aimed to be the first person to reach Everest's summit. On June 8th, 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out from their high camp for the summit, but they never made it back. The exact circumstances of their deaths, it's still not 100% known to this day. Mallory's body was discovered in 1999, well preserved due to the cold climate, but Irvine's body and their camera, which could have contained evidence of a summit attempt, were not found. We still don't know if they reached the summit before they died or if they were descending when they met their ends. Next on the list is Joseph Avery. This photograph, taken in 1853, captures a man named Joseph Avery clutching onto a log for his dear life. Avery had been boating along the Niagara River with two other friends when the strong current caused them to lose control of their boat, crashing it into a rock. The two other passengers were carried off in the current, falling over the falls to their deaths. Avery managed to grab onto a log though, where he spent 18 whole hours. He must have started feeling completely hopeless until finally help did arrive. A rescue boat came to his aid, and he finally let out a sigh of relief. He could just let go of that goddamn log and would go on to live another day. Only he wouldn't, because the rescue boat capsized almost immediately, sending Avery over the falls where his two friends had perished just 18 hours before. I would have just been mad instead of scared at that point, I think. Like, real, after 18 hours, what a cruel fate that would have been. I should have just let go immediately. I spent a whole day here. Oh, anyway, I bet you let out some curse words on his way down. Oh man, sorry buddy. Number 3, the Dyatlov Pass incident. In 1959, a group of 10 students and alumni from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, began an expedition across the northern Urals in what was once then the Soviet Union. It was estimated that their trek would take about 16 days to complete, but the group would never return. A search party was dispatched days after the group had been expected to return home. The search and rescue teams did find the hikers, but not alive, and the cause of their deaths are still a mystery to this very day. First, their tents were discovered. They looked to have been torn open from the inside, and most of their gear remained, but the hikers themselves were nowhere to be seen. The following day, the bodies of the hikers were discovered. They had removed most of their clothing and seemed to have ventured out into the cold for some inexplicable reason. Hypothermia was of course the first suspected cause of death, but the students all had strange injuries that left the rescue team stumped. Bruises were present. One of them had thrown up blood. The last 4 bodies were discovered months later. They had built themselves a shelter, and they were fully clothed, but had suffered lethal wounds as well. They had broken bones and blunt force trauma to the head. Horrifyingly, 2 of them were missing their eyes. There are tons of theories about what happened here, ranging from a nuclear testing accident or secret government experiment to aliens somehow being involved, but yeah, we just don't know for sure. In at number 2 is the South Pole Expedition. Captain Robert Falcon Scott, great name, led a British expedition to the South Pole in 1911 to 1912. On January 17, 1912, after a long, grueling trek, Scott and his team finally reached the pole, only to discover that a Norwegian team, led by Roald Amundsen, had already arrived. This photograph shows them just after they made it to their destination. You could tell they're not only completely disheartened, but in noticeably bad shape. They're frostbitten, they look weak and just fed up. They began the long, torturous return journey across the frozen landscape. Facing severe weather, exhaustion, dwindling supplies, the team struggled to make progress and food shortages became very critical. Edgar Evans died on February 17, 1912, followed by Lawrence Oates, who ended his life by walking out of the tent into a blizzard. Scott and his remaining companions, Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, and Edgar Evans, pressed on, but their physical condition just continued to get worse. They were trapped in their tent for 9 days by a storm, unable to go anywhere, and they eventually died in the tent, just 11 miles from a supply depot. Scott's last diary entry was dated March 29th, 1912. Coming in at our number 1 spot, we have these portraits of some of the crew in John Franklin's polar expedition. These photographs were taken just 3 days before they set sail. John Franklin and his crew embarked on their expedition in 1845 to find the Northwest Passage, a sea route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic. The expedition included 2 ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. However, both ships became trapped in ice off the coast of King William Island in the Canadian Arctic. The harsh conditions took a toll on the crew. Franklin died in June 1847, probably from exposure and starvation. With their ships immobilized by ice, the crew attempted to survive on land, and over the next few years, many of the crew members succumbed to starvation, exposure, and diseases. In desperation, some had resorted to in an effort to find help, some crew members set out on foot, but none survived. In total, all 129 men on the expedition perished, and the ships themselves were abandoned in 1848, and the crew left behind written records of their struggles. The remains of the expedition's members were discovered by search parties, and investigations revealed these tragic circumstances.
Coming in at number 10 is North Korea Camp. North Korean prison camps are a place of horror. Now, this photo was taken at one of their camps called Chonggori Camp. The main purpose of Chonggori Camp is to punish people for usual crimes or political crimes such as illegal border crossings. Now, the prisoners here are also used as slave laborers, and as a result, they are forced to do hard and dangerous work for 14 hours a day. The prisoners live in crowded, dirty, insect-infested rooms without heating, while there is just one washing room for 1,000 prisoners. Now, because of these bad hygienic conditions, in the summer of 2003, about 190 prisoners died of an infectious disease. Now, 70 prisoners sleep in a room which is only designed to hold 20 people, lying on the floor without pillows or blankets. Not to mention, prisoners only get 140 grams of rice 3 times a day, while they're being forced to do hard labor such as logging with iron chains. Now, often prisoners have their lives ended or they are crippled in work accidents. Prisoners are regularly subjected to beatings and inhumane treatment, all of which are administered by the guard's discretion. When a prisoner breaks a rule, he is tormented and confined in a solitary cell so small where he cannot stretch his legs for many days or weeks. Now, many people say these camps camps have human rights violations, and with everything we do know, I can't imagine all the other horrors of the other camps. Number 9. Dorothy Counts. Dorothy Counts is an American civil rights pioneer and one of the first black students admitted to the Harry Harding High School. In 1956, 40 black students from North Carolina applied to transfer to a white school after the passing of the Purcell Plan. Dorothy's family applied her and her 2 brothers to enroll in an all-white school after her father was approached by Kelly Alexander Sr. Now, of her family, only Dorothy was accepted, and Dorothy was dropped off on her first day of school by her father, along with their family friend, Edwin Tompkins. As their car was blocked from going closer to the entrance, Edwin offered to escort Dorothy to the front of the school while her father parked the car. As she got out of the car to head down the hill, her father told her, "Hold your head high, you are inferior to no one." Now, in this photo, you can see her being harassed by her classmates. After just 4 days of harassment that threatened her safety, her parents withdrew her from the school, but the images of Dorothy being verbally assaulted by her white classmates were seen around the world. Number 8. First woman in the Boston Marathon. Catherine Switzer was 20 years old when she decided to run the Boston Marathon in 1967. Now, at the time, it was an all-male race. Women were not allowed to run, and organizers always ridiculed them. Now, no one believed a woman could run it, so when Catherine signed up, she signed the necessary paperwork with her initials. When the race started, she set off alongside her boyfriend Tom Miller, and while running, camera crews and photographers from a press bus spotted her and photographed her a lot. Now, as this was happening, an official spotted her running. Jock Semple, the race manager, ran after her in leather shoes and tried to rip off her number. "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers," he yelled. Now, before he could pull her out of the race, Tom blocked him. The idea of women running in the marathon was highly controversial. Now, Catherine finished the race, knowing it would look like a publicity stunt if she stopped, and thankfully 5 years later, women were given the right to run in the marathon. Number 7. Last public execution. Eugen Weidmann was a German criminal and serial slayer who was executed by guillotine in France in June 1939, which was the last public execution in France. After a failed first attempt, Eugen and his accomplices managed to successfully kidnap an American woman named Jean de Coven, and Jean was lured to the house the trio rented, and she was strangled to death by Eugen and buried in the backyard. A couple months later, Eugen shot a chauffeur named Joseph Chofee to death and stole his money. Just 2 days later, Eugen ended the life of a woman named Janine Keller. Janine was also shot and robbed. 3 other people had their lives ended by Eugen and his accomplices, all of them being shot to death and then robbed. Eugen's last victim had a business card from Eugen in his house, which resulted in the police tracking down Eugen, since it seemed that he was one of the last people who had seen the victim alive. When confronted, Eugen tried to shoot the 2 policemen who had come to arrest him. However, Eugen was knocked unconscious with a hammer by one of the policemen and promptly taken into custody. He was found guilty of homicide and was sentenced to death. On June 17, 1939, Eugen was beheaded outside the prison in St. Pierre and Versailles. The historical behavior by spectators was so scandalous that French President Albert Lebrun immediately banned all future public executions. Number 6. Erase Nikolai Yezhkov. Nikolai Yezhkov was a Soviet secret police officer under Joseph Stalin, who was the head of the NKVD from 1936 to 1938 during the height of the Great Purge. He organized mass arrests, torment, and executions, but then he fell from Stalin's good graces. He was arrested and subsequently admitted in a confession to a range of anti-Soviet activity, including unfound arrests during the Purge. He was executed in 1940 along with others who were blamed for the Purge, and Nikolai was not only ousted, executed, and disgraced along with his family, he was then methodically erased from photographs where he had previously appeared with his commander. Overnight, Nikolai went from one of the highest officers in a powerful New World Order to a shadow in a poorly lit photo and a name no one dared to utter. Now, Nikolai wasn't the only person to receive this Photoshop treatment, as it was common in the communist government to deny failures and make inconvenient truths, even people disappear. Now, this practice has continued in current communist-led governments where rebellion rebellious leaders are removed by force and deleted from official documents. Number 5. Criminals in a box. This disturbing photo was taken in July 1913 by French photographer Albert Kahn. He often took trips through exotic countries, and it was during a visit in Mongolia that he happened to stumble upon this woman who had been condemned to a slow and painful starvation. She was boxed up in what would become her tomb and deposited in a remote desert. There were bowls of water on the ground, and the prisoner is allowed to beg passerbys for food, though not much is given. Now, the photographer was forced to leave her there, as it would be against prime directive of anthropologists to intervene in a culture's law or order system. Anthropologists are only able to observe, they cannot push their own beliefs or interfere in any way. Now, it's just incredibly disturbing though, and I can't imagine what was going through Albert's mind when he found her. Number 4. The Exorcism of Anneliese Michael. Anneliese Michael was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death. When she was younger, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she had become intolerant of various religious objects and began to hear voices. After the taking of psychiatric medications for over 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Anneliese and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism, and while rejected at first, 2 priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priests began conducting exorcism sessions, and the parents stopped consulting doctors. She began increasingly speaking about dying to atone of the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church. Now, a total of 67 exorcism sessions, 1 or 2 each week, lasting up to hours each, were performed for approximately 10 months in 1975 and 1976. Number 3. Radium Girls. The Radium Girls were female factory workers who contracted radiation poisoning from painting radium dials, watch dials, and hands with self-luminous paint. The incidents occurred at 3 factories in the United States, one in Orange, New Jersey beginning around 1917, one in Ottawa, Illinois beginning in the early 1920s, and one in Waterbury, Connecticut also in the 1920s. Now, after being told that the paint was harmless, the women in each facility ingested deadly amounts of radium after being instructed to point their brushes on their lips in order to give them a fine tip, and some also painted their fingernails, faces, and teeth with the glowing substance. Now, the prolonged exposure to radium caused dental pain, loose teeth, lesions, and ulcers, and the failure of tooth extractions to heal were some of these conditions. Now, many of the women later began to develop anemia, bone fractures, and caused their vertebrae to collapse, their jaws to swell up and fall off, and their lives to slowly end in agony while battling cancer. Now, the photo here shows one of the victims, and it's truly heartbreaking. Number 2. Unit 731. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that engaged in lethal human experimentation and biological weapons manufacturing during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. Now, this photo shows them experimenting on prisoners. It's estimated that this place ended the lives of 200,000 to 300,000 people. Unit 731 was responsible for some of the most notorious war crimes committed by the Japanese armed forces. It routinely conducted tests on people who were dehumanized and internally referred to as logs. Experiments included disease injections, controlled dehydration, biological weapons testing, vivisection, organ harvesting, amputation, and standard weapons testing. In other tests, subjects were deprived of food and water to determine the amount of time until death. They were also placed into low-pressure chambers until their eyes popped from their sockets, experimented upon to determine the relationship between temperatures, burns. They were hung upside down until death, crushed with heavy objects, electrocuted, dehydrated with hot fans, injected with animal blood, exposed to lethal doses of X-rays, subjected to various chemical weapons inside gas chambers, injected with seawater, and burned or buried alive. Now, this place was truly horrific, and so many people suffered. And coming in at number 1 is Blanche Monnier. When French authorities received an anonymous tip in 1901 that a woman was being held prisoner at an aristocrat's house in the city of Poitiers, they sent out officers to search the home. Behind the locked door of the pitch-black attic, they found a skeletal middle-aged woman laying on a straw mattress covered with her own excrement, while insects and rotting food littered the floor. Now, the room's odor was so disgusting that officers couldn't even continue their investigation, but they were able to learn that the 55-pound woman still clinging to life after 25 years trapped in that same room was named Blanche Mortimer, and that her captor was her own mother. Now, this photo of her was taken shortly after she was rescued.
And we're starting off the list with this photo here. Just look at this happy young couple. They got their arms around each other. They're smiling for the camera. With my keen senses of sight and sharp detective skills, I can also see that they're standing right in front of a tent. And due to the dark background and dirt-like appearance of the ground they're standing on, it appears as if they're outdoors. There also appears to be a fire raging in the bottom left-hand corner. And because the couple are posing for a picture rather than panicking, I think we got ourselves a good old-fashioned tent and fire party on our hands. A camping trip, perhaps. Everything looks pretty normal until your eyes drift to the left of the couple. Just what in tarnation is that? A short, semi-translucent figure seems to be lurking right behind this unwitting couple. Kind of looks like a ghost doll. Two words that should never be placed beside each other in a sentence. If you're liking our channel, by the way, why not hit that subscribe button? You got nothing to lose. And leave your comments down below. What do you think of these photographs in this list? And at number 9, we have this photo, which I'm just gonna call the mysterious ghoul. Before we get to the scary stuff though, let me use my keen intellect to set the scene here. Don't have a lot of information about these pictures, so I gotta pull from them what I can. All three of these gentlemen are dressed as fancy lads. Nice fitted tuxedos, and they're all smiling at the camera. Pretty obvious to me that these guys were dressed up to hit the cinema to catch the latest Bond movie on opening night. Due to the quality of the picture, I'm gonna guess this is like 2006, so Casino Royale. Nice. They look pretty excited to catch the flick too. But they wouldn't be so excited if they saw the ghoul like crouching between their legs at the bottom of the picture. Like, who invited Reagan from The Exorcist to the 007 dress-up party? What is a ghoul? A small zombie? Nightmare fuel. That's what it is. Anyway, I hope these guys didn't get mauled by this demon as soon as Terry put his $12 disposable Kodak camera back in his pocket to document the rest of the evening. And at number 8, we have the family photo. Old vintage photographs are always a bit unsettling to me. I feel like most of you would probably agree with that. The black and white just makes everything look drab and sad, but I think the main reason why vintage pictures are so off-putting is that everyone in them is probably dead by now. And in this picture, we see a happy family. There are a whole bunch of empty lawn chairs behind them, way more than are necessary for one family. So my guess is that they just had a party, but they may have had one uninvited guest make an appearance in their family picture, lurking in the background to the left, right in front of the door. It doesn't look like it has a body, or maybe it has a body, but it's just shrouded in shadow. Just what is this thing though? Is it a clown, an intruder wearing a kabuki mask? Let us know your thoughts down below, but I don't like it. Next on the list, we have this picture of a lady smiling in bed. She looks glad to be home. Can't blame her, and why would I want to? Nothing wrong with being happy and smiling. But there's a lot of strange stuff going on with this picture. Using my hawk-like eyes, I see she looks to be wearing a Christmas-themed blanket, but the fan pointing directly at her face tells me a different story. It tells me it's hot in that room, so I don't think it's December. Then again, the fan isn't on, so does she just leave the fan perched over her bed all year round collecting dust? Or does it just happen to be off at this present moment and she lives somewhere maybe where it's warm all year round, like California? It's either Christmas in Cali or she just really likes Christmas and wears that blanket all the time. The point is, there's something hiding in this picture. I'll give you a second to figure out what it is. Yeah, right where the corner of the mattress and the back of the bed frame meet, there's an eye poking out from under the bed. Whoever this person is, they're obviously hiding. But the question is, does she know this person is there? Like, maybe is she hiding them? Is it her boyfriend who's not supposed to be there? Or is it an intruder? It's pretty much either one of those situations. At our number 6 spot, we have a photo I'm going to call the tree trunk terror. This is one for all you arachnophobes out there. Yeah, it doesn't take long looking at this picture to realize there's a massive sized spider parked right in the middle of this tree, blending in with the bark. I'm not sure what kind of tree this is. It doesn't look like a particularly big one, but the spider's legs extend out pretty far. I'm guessing this would probably be almost the size of a grown man's hand, which just isn't good. I don't want that in a spider. Imagine walking through the woods at night. You're trying to find your way back to your tent after taking a leak. You're already freaked out because a ghost was spotted in the picture your buddy took of you and your girlfriend in front of the fire. And then you place your hand on a tree only to feel something long and furry squirming around under your hand. It's not a squirrel, a little too skinny to be a squirrel. It's this spider. Your camping career would probably be over in an instant and nobody would blame you. Number 5, newlyweds. Oh no, not another old vintage black and white photograph. So we have a couple who look to have just gotten married. The wife looks mildly pleased. The husband looks like he's doing the 1,000-yard stare. Maybe he's been forced into this arrangement. Anyway, people rarely smile on old photographs though, so maybe they were very happy. Who knows? What really that makes this picture feel extra haunted though is lurking in the background. Take a gander at the window. Clearly you can see a figure peering out. It looks to be a man dressed in a suit and a tie, possibly a wedding guest. There's something off about him. His features are almost entirely blurred. You can't make out eyes, a nose, a mouth, all those things that make a human face comfortable to look at. So is this a deceased family member making a visit from the afterlife to attend this wedding? Or did these folks just not clean their windows like ever? Next we have lurking fear. Now, it's hard for me to really call this a normal photo. Wherever this is, it looks like a pretty creepy place. Completely dilapidated and the lighting is very low. It looks like nighttime. Seems to me we have an abandoned place of some kind on our hands, and abandoned places are inherently unsettling, not to mention kind of dangerous. If it's not an abandoned place, it's just someone's very unkempt apartment. They need to clean every once in a while, keep everything in their place from rotting away. Anyway, it's very hard to spot at first glance with all the mess filling up the frame, but if you look pretty much dead center, you'll see a pair of beady glowing eyes and a pale face peering out from the debris of what used to be a wall. Most likely, it's a squatter, but the low camera quality and the dim lighting makes it look a bit like a rake or golem, which is not fun. Next up we have the Pigman. This photo was taken at Fort Worden Artillery Battery, an abandoned artillery base. You could see 2 people hugging. I don't know about you, but a dark, dank, decrepit concrete passage is not where I'd want to be for an intimate embrace. Anyway, scan your eyes to the top left of the frame, and you can clearly see a figure sandwiched between the ceiling and a concrete structure. It's probably just the sweet early 2000s digital camera quality that's making this person look so messed up, but to me this person looks like a pigman. And the last thing I'd want is to be exploring an abandoned military barracks that are probably haunted already, only to have a deformed pig monster jump down on my head from up in the ceiling somewhere. Ugh. And in second place, we have Chucky. Just look at these cool bros. They look chill. They look cool. They're just a couple bros hanging out, posing for a picture on their sweet 2006 photo booth app. Remember how entertaining photo booth used to be? The amount of embarrassing photo booth pictures there are of me floating around the internet. Anyway, these two aren't the only people captured in this picture. Looks like we got something lurking in the background, and it doesn't look friendly. I joke, but whatever that is at the bottom center of the frame, it's pretty nightmare inducing. It looks kind of like a Chucky doll, or again like Reagan from The Exorcist, and neither neither of which I'd want creeping around in the shadows of my home at night. And finally, we have this photo of a cute cat. Look at this cute cat. It's just having dinner, looking up at the camera, but the glowing eyes of the cat aren't the only glowing eyes in this picture. Just what are those two beady glowing green eyes in the background there? Is it perhaps another cat or maybe a dog? Well, that's highly unlikely because looking closely, this picture was taken from high up. We have stairs leading down to the left, and it looks like we're around the same height of those branches in the tree in the top right of the picture. So whatever those eyes are, they're pretty high up. Maybe it's a giant cat, but that's really scary too. Or most likely, they're big enough to be all the way at ground level and still be seen from high up. So it's some kind of creature down there. And we're starting off with this image here. This photo was taken during a ceremony of Order of the Solar Temple. This is a very secretive group who would never want their practices being made known to outsiders. It's actually kind of surprising there are actual photos of them in their secret meetings, to be honest. So this group is pretty bizarre, very disturbing. Yes, they are still around today. Luckily, there hasn't been any real drama in recent years, though. This is a doomsday cult. At least it was in the 80s and early 90s. It mixed Knights Templar stuff with space. Love a good mixed genre kind of cult. Sci-fi and knights. I'm sold. Oh wait, you mean I gotta shed my physical body and reach a higher plane of existence on a distant planet, and the only way to do that is to take my own life? I'm out. On October 4th of 1994, 53 members of the cult in Canada and Switzerland either took their own lives or violently took the lives of others, and then the homes where they died were set on fire. Two similar events would take place in the months that followed. There is something so unsettling about the photos of them during their ceremonies. Obviously, this group was involved in these horrific incidents, but even setting aside the context, if I had no idea what these pictures were, I'd still find them a bit creepy. The robes, the Templar style iconography, the old graininess of the images, it all just makes me feel uneasy. Staying with the Order of the Solar Temple for number 9 here, this is another unsettling image for you. This is a coffin being carried out on a stretcher from a house in Quebec, Canada. You can clearly see that there had been a fire in the house. This incident took place in 1997, a few years after the initial mass unalivings took place in Switzerland. 5 members took their own life inside the house before it was set on fire with an automatic ignition system. Next, we have the Superior Universal Alignment. This photo here is of the cult's leader, Valentina de Andrade, when she was being arrested, a moment she would probably rather forget. Superior Universal Alignment was a cult in Brazil that blended dark satanic elements with UFOs. The media focused more on the satanic element, as this was the late 80s and early 90s, and the whole satanic panic thing was still somewhat of a thing. But also, some believe this group was involved in organ trafficking. So what happened is that between 1989 and 1993 in Altamira, Brazil, a number of young men either went missing or were found dead under very violent circumstances. Authorities had a hard time identifying the culprit until 2 of their prime suspects mentioned they were in a group called the Superior Universal Alignment. This group was again led by Valentina de Andrade. She had this very odd belief that males born after 1981 were essentially evil because she'd been contacted by extraterrestrial beings who told her so. Anyway, she was investigated, but there wasn't enough evidence for her involvement in the crimes to land her in jail. Luckily, 4 other members were convicted, but Valentina ended up fleeing to Argentina, where she disturbingly still preaches her insane beliefs today. Number 7, Nexium. This is a photo taken of several members of the group, many whose faces have been obscured, with a few prominent members like Alison Mack and leader Keith Raniere clearly visible. NXIVM was a self-help group turned cult that got into hot water. The leader, Keith Raniere, was accused of running a secret society within NXIVM where people, mostly women, go figure, were manipulated into having intimate relationships with him. These members were also branded and they were blackmailed in order to keep quiet about everything. Some high-profile folks like Smallville actress Allison Mack got caught up as well. The whole thing was a complete mess, but luckily in the end, the creep Raniere got convicted on various charges. Mack and others also faced legal consequences. But Raniere is still involved in the cult from behind bars, with several members branching off, still being active today. At number 6, we have Love Has Won. This is the last photo of Amy Carlson, leader of a cult called Love Has Won. You probably see something immediately off about her complexion. It has a gray, bluish tint to it. That's because she was ingesting high amounts of silver. Carlson claimed to be the embodiment of a spiritual figure, often referring to herself as the divine or Mother God. Love Has Won attracted followers who believed in Carlson's divine status and followed her spiritual teachings. Carlson claimed to have been reincarnated like hundreds of times, having been some pretty big names in her former lives: Joan of Arc, Marilyn Monroe, Cleopatra, and of course, Jesus. I had no idea that all those people were the same person. It's pretty incredible. She also claimed to have talked to Robin Williams after he died, of course. Donald Trump was also her father in a past life. I mean, what a legacy. She also preached that lizard people were part of a cabal that was forcing the planet to be in a low vibration state. Now, this is all pretty goofy, but nothing evil, right? Well, several former members came out talking about all the manipulation. Yeah, manipulation. Really? There's manipulation going on here? I didn't realize. And also mistreatment. And this all went on at the hands of Amy and other higher-ups in the group. There was also apparently a lot of racist and anti-Semitic rhetoric going on, which really doesn't surprise me when you read the long list of insane stuff this lady was talking about. Oh, hippies, you truly are the worst. In 2021, news broke that Amy Carlson had passed away. Her body was discovered in a residence in Colorado where the group was based. She was basically mummified, with her eyes almost having rotted away completely. Looks like love lost. Loser. Japan Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 747, crashed on August 12th of 1985, taking the lives of 520 of the 524 people on board. The crash was caused by severe structural failure, which led to a rapid decompression and loss of control. The last photo recovered from the crash site was taken by one of the passengers on the flight. In the photo, passengers can be seen wearing oxygen masks. The accident was caused by the rupture of the aircraft's rear pressure bulkhead, which separated the pressurized cabin from the unpressurized tail section. The bulkhead had been improperly repaired after a tail strike incident 7 years earlier. And the failure of the rear pressure bulkhead led to a sudden and explosive decompression inside the cabin. Decompression caused damage to control cables and systems, making it almost impossible for the pilots to maintain control of the plane. The craft eventually entered a rapid descent and crashed into a mountain range. There were actually more than 4 passengers who survived the initial crash, but they died after several hours waiting to be rescued. Japan Airlines Flight 123 crash is one of the deadliest single aircraft accidents in aviation history. Number 5, Snake Man. This is the last photo taken of Ali Khan Samsudin. He was known as the Snake King after he spent 12 hours a day for 40 days living with 400 cobras in a small room. He also stayed in a small glass enclosure with 6,000 scorpions for 21 days, earning him the title Scorpion King. His 2006 performance in Kuala Lumpur would sadly be his last, though. During his show, he was bitten by a king cobra, one of the deadliest snakes in the world, with venom powerful enough to take down a full-sized elephant in a matter of hours. Samsudin had been bitten before. He'd even suffered a couple cobra bites before. before and made it out alive, but this time he didn't recover. His condition just got worse and worse, and the Snake King died in the hospital 3 days later. Next, we have the last photo of Mayinga Naseka. Mayinga Naseka was a nurse in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, during the 1976 Ebola outbreak. She contracted the Ebola virus while treating patients at Mambalad Hospital in Kinshasa. She caught the virus while treating a nun who had been flown in from Yambuku Mission Hospital, where the initial outbreak began. Naseka's case became widely known as she was one of the earliest identified healthcare workers to be infected during the outbreak. And in this photo, you see her standing with another nurse tending to a patient. She died just a few days after this picture was taken. The nurses weren't given the proper protective equipment, and there hadn't been any proper precautions taken to prevent contact with the nun's blood or fluids, because at the time, it wasn't known just how deadly the virus really was. Next up, we have the 1961 US figure skating team. This is the last photo of the US figure skating team, which was taken at the airport shortly before they boarded Sabina Flight 548. In the photo, team members appeared in high spirits, smiling, posing for the camera. Little did they know that this would be the last moment captured before the tragic event that claimed their lives. On February 15th of 1961, Sabina Flight 548, a Boeing 707 aircraft, crashed while attempting to land at Brussels Airport in Belgium. The plane was carrying the entire team, along with coaches, officials, and other passengers. The crash resulted in the tragic loss of 72 people on board. The cause of the crash never been 100% determined, but the most likely cause was a failure in the plane's flap system combined with poor weather conditions. The pilot struggled to maintain control during the landing attempt, leading to the deadly accident. Alright, next up we have the last photo of Christopher McCandless. On September 6th, 1992, the decomposing body of Christopher McCandless was found in a bus he had been living in just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska. McCandless had embarked on a journey to leave civilization behind and live off the grid. He spent 113 days living off the land, using the bus as his shelter. His journal entries were discovered, and it was likely he died about 19 days before his body was discovered. After living in the bus for over 3 months, McCandless finally decided he was going to try and make his way back to civilization. But this was unfortunately not going to be as easy as he thought. The river he had crossed to reach the bus was now much higher and swifter than it was when he first ventured in. He decided to turn back, left an SOS note on the bus reading, "Attention possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I'm injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I'm all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I'm collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless." McCandless succumbed to starvation while waiting for help that never arrived. When his body was discovered, he appeared extremely gaunt, reportedly weighing only around 60 pounds at the time of his death. So the first photo we're taking a look at is this one here. On February 3rd of 1959, musicians J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, and Buddy Holly tragically died in a plane crash near Clear Lake, Iowa, in what is famously known as the day the music died. This is the last photo taken of the three before boarding their final flight. The musicians had been traveling on a small Beechcraft Bonanza airplane, chartered after their tour bus broke down. The plane, piloted by Roger Peterson, took off from the Mason City Municipal Airport en route to Hector Airport in Fargo, North Dakota. The weather conditions on the night of the crash were poor, with a combination of snow, sleet, and fog, and despite these conditions, the flight took off anyway, and the plane crashed only a few minutes after takeoff, around 1 a.m., into a cornfield near Clear Lake. There were no survivors. If you like videos just like this, creepy paranormal stuff, cryptid stuff, ghost stuff, we got it all, so hit that subscribe button and don't miss out. Next on the list is the 1943 glider crash. This is the last photograph taken of William D. Becker, the former mayor of St. Louis, along with several other prominent men in the community, right after boarding a brand new Waco CG-4 glider, manufactured by William B. Robertson, also pictured here. This was going to be the first public demonstration of the aircraft taking flight. Spectators watched from Lampert St. Louis Airport as the men boarded the glider, and what they didn't know was that they were witnessing the last moments of these men's lives. The glider was taxied by a plane to a runway runaway for takeoff. They took flight, and once ready to allow the glider to glide, the towing cable was released. Almost immediately after the glider was released, though, something terrifying happened. Its right wing completely snapped off. Now, a wing snapping off of an aircraft spells disaster no matter what type of aircraft it is, but keep in mind these gliders were engineless, created specifically for the war efforts to be released like this and then glide down, usually into enemy lines. So now completely on its own and missing a wing, there was no way for it to make a safe landing. It just plummeted towards the earth, crashing into the ground. All 10 men aboard died on impact. Next up, we have the death of Robert Overacker. Robert Overacker was a daredevil from Camarillo, California. At 12:35 p.m. October 1st, he attempted to go over Niagara Falls on a jet ski with the intention of raising awareness about the homeless. And during his attempt, Overacker wore a life jacket and was carrying a flag promoting a charity for the homeless. He had also intended to deploy a parachute at the last moment to escape the fall, but the parachute didn't deploy and he plunged over the falls. This photo was taken just as he went over. He was only 39 years old. Number 7, George Mallerie and Sandy Irvine. On June 8th, 1924, British mountaineers George Mallerie and Andrew Sandy Irvine went missing on Mount Everest during their attempt to reach the summit. Mallerie and Irvine were part of the British 1924 Mount Everest expedition led by General Charles Bruce. The pair were last seen by their fellow climber Noel Odell at an elevation of around 28,000 feet on the northeast ridge of the mountain. The weather on Everest that day was unstable, very overcast with snow making for low visibility. After Mallerie and Irvine failed to return to their camp, search parties were sent out, but no trace of them was found. Several expeditions in the following years attempted to locate Mallerie and Irvine's remains and their camera, hoping to find clues about whether they reached the summit, but it wasn't until 1999 that Mallory's body was discovered on the north face of the mountain. The last photo snapped of them was taken by Noel Odell right before they began their ascent. Next on the list, we have the Branch Davidians. This photo here was taken during the famous 51-day siege of former leader David Koresh's compound in Waco, Texas in 1993. So without any context, it looks just like any other fire, but looking at these images, knowing what was going on, that so many people were dying, it's just very dark. In the early 90s, the Branch Davidians were a doomsday cult being led by David Koresh, who managed to convince everyone he was the final prophet. He and several other members were living in a compound near Waco, Texas. The authorities got involved due to suspicions about illegal weapons in the compound, which there very much were. In 1993, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to raid the compound, and it went south pretty fast. A shootout ensued, leaving several dead on both sides. The situation just continued to escalate, and the FBI ended up taking over. They surrounded the compound for a lengthy siege. Eventually, the FBI launched a final assault using tear gas. A few hours later, a fire erupted within the compound. It's still unclear how it actually started. Some believe the FBI caused it, but there's others that blame the Davidians themselves. In any case, though, the compound burned down and Koresh died inside, along with many of his followers. Number 4, the Children of God. This is a photo of members of the Children of God in prayer. You wouldn't know it based on this image alone, but there were some very dark things going on behind closed doors, and it just adds a very dark layer to images like this one. The cult is still active today, but now they really want to distance themselves from former leader David Berg and the horrific things that went on in the 70s and 80s, now calling themselves the Family International. The group was founded by David Berg, aka Satan personified, in the late 1960s. They started out as a hippie-like group with unconventional beliefs. They believed in a combination of Christianity and free love, often engaging in communal living, and you could probably guess what that entailed based on the whole free love thing. As the group evolved, allegations of exploitation and mistreatment began to come to light, and members were reportedly encouraged to use physical intimacy as a means of recruiting new followers, a practice known as flirty fishing. Several members started seeing the dark side of the group though, and I can't really go into details here. but suffice to say, this was not a group you would ever want to raise a family in. Former members have come out since, accusing the cult of using mind control techniques and subjecting followers to psychological manipulation and much worse. Next on the list, we have Shinrikyo. This photo here is of the military cleaning a subway car after the Tokyo subway sarin attack of 1995. Shinrikyo was a Japanese cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 1987. The group became infamous after the deadly Tokyo subway sarin gas attack in 1995, which took the lives of 13 people and injured over 1,000. Asahara proclaimed himself to be Christ and the only one who could save followers from the coming apocalypse. The cult kind of blended elements of several religions and spiritual traditions with its leaders' doomsday prophecies. The group had a very large following, including some highly educated members. The cult was involved in a number of violent attacks, but the Tokyo subway attack was the worst of the worst, and following this incident, authorities finally cracked down on the cult, leading to the arrest of Asahara and other key members. Asahara was finally sentenced to death for his role in the crimes, but surprisingly, the cult is still active to this day. Number 2, the True Russian Orthodox Church. This is a photograph of part of the Doomsday Cult's cave hideout. I think I'd rather just die in the apocalypse than live in that dump, especially because the leader of this cult didn't even let his followers watch TV. What are you gonna do down there? Pyotr Kuznetsov led a Russian doomsday cult that gained international attention when in 2007, several members of the cult, known as the True Russian Orthodox Church, barricaded themselves in a remote cave in the Panza region. Kuznetsov wasn't with them as he was in police custody. He claimed to be a prophet, and his teachings combined elements of Christianity with apocalyptic visions. The cult believed that the world would soon come to an end, and isolating themselves in the cave, they hoped to be saved from the impending apocalypse. Authorities were alerted to the location of the cave, but members inside were threatening to take their own lives if police tried to intervene. As the situation continued to escalate, authorities became more and more concerned about the well-being of the cult members, especially given reports of starvation and just the harsh conditions inside the cave. After several months, Russian security forces intervened to finally remove the followers from the cave. 2 members had died over the winter, and they'd created these toxic fumes within the cave. Kuznetsov attempted to take his own life after he'd realized his doomsday prediction was wrong. His whereabouts are not currently known to the public, but it's believed that he is still alive. And finally, we have Adolfo Constanzo. This photo here kind of looks like a witch's cauldron, and that's pretty much exactly what it is. The cauldron belonged to Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, the leader of a drug smuggling cult that also performed ritualistic human sacrifices. The group mainly operated in Mexico. Constanzo practiced his own kind of twisted version of Palo Mayombe, a form of African Caribbean religion. The cult engaged in drug trafficking, human sacrifice, and ritualistic practices. Constanzo believed that these rituals granted him these supernatural powers and protection that would aid in the group's criminal activities. In 1989, a series of events unfolded which led to the downfall of the cult. A kidnapped victim managed to escape, and he informed authorities about the cult's activities. And then in a subsequent raid on the cult's compound, Constanzo and several other followers died in a shootout with police.
Number 10, nighttime operations. On November 15th, 2020, well-known YouTube videographers Tim and Tracy of the UFO Seekers channel took an interesting clip shot from outside the restricted Nevada Test and Training Range, or the NTTR. The new video shows some common NTTR activity, including the camo dude, security personnel, the comings and goings of NTTR employee shuttles, and more interestingly, a lot of air activity over the region, especially at night. The video showed what is most likely a significant nighttime special operations tactical training exercise or capabilities tested at the Nevada Test and Training Range. Most interestingly, the scene appears to be lit by a series of LUU-19BB infrared airdropped illumination flares for use with night vision devices. The video was 20 minutes long and shows a series of bright lights at low altitude as viewed through their infrared night vision video equipment. Visible in the video are a series of orbiting lights around the brighter descending lights. About specific tests and training activities inside the NTTR don't surface often. The US Air Force published an article on October 24, 2020, saying operations on the Nevada test and training range are continuous. When one operation finishes, another is right behind it, ready to begin. The couple also caught a video of security vehicles and a large bus leaving the gated area distantly adjacent from where the action in their video took place. Now, it's impossible to tell what's actually going on exclusively from the video, but whatever it was big and it looked interesting.
Alright, so this next photo is of Jerry Freeman, taken on a forbidden trip back in 1997. And his head here is supposedly covering the area where the secret S4 hangars are, according to the legendary Bob Lazar. So, this guy had quite the adventure close to the forbidden military base, and according to him, he was actually within the restricted area at points, but the exact borders of Area 51 aren't really shared with the public. So, what's the story with this guy? Jerry Freeman, an archaeologist, decided in 1997 that he was going to embark on a 7-day trek into the highly restricted Nevada test site. The funny thing is about this case though, is that he really had no interest in what most of us would want to see behind the Area 51 curtain. He was just interested in tracing back the trail of the lost 49ers, pioneers who had traversed the area in 1849. He was in search of an inscription made by one of the pioneers, which was believed to be a Nye Canyon above Papoose Lake on the Nellis Air Force Base, totally off limits. Freeman spent days avoiding security. He slept with nothing but a blanket and the clothes on his back. He traveled very light, too light. He was running out of water by the end. And the funny thing is that after this dangerous trek, people were asking him like, so did you see Area 51? What's in there? Where are the UFOs, man? And again, just had no interest in that side of it. So he was like, I think at one point I might have seen Area 51. He'd like climbed on a ridge above Nye Canyon looking down on Papoose Dry Lake, which is just south of Area 51. And he was like, yeah, during the day I didn't see much, but one night I saw some lights. One looked like it was coming from a security vehicle. One was kind of stationary, but it seemed to grow and like shrink in size. Could have been a hangar door opening and closing. I don't know, it's an interesting kind of case.
Number 8. Codename Hood. A book by Los Angeles Times journalist Annie Jacobson, Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base, Little Brown, tells the story of the famous site that has spurred tales and rumors of intrigue and cover-ups. Annie dove through thousands of recently declassified documents to reveal what happened in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s at the government-restricted area near Groom Lake, Nevada. In the book, there were some photos, and for this one, Annie said, the black device attached to this balloon in Area 9 of the Nevada test site is a 74 kiloton atomic bomb codenamed Hood, the largest atmospheric nuclear weapon ever exploded in the United States. Standing on a ladder minutes before this photograph was taken on July 5th, 1957, Al O'Donnell put the final touches on the bomb firing system. Area 51 is over the hill to the right of the device, and on the next page and photo and row, a column of radioactive smoke rises from the Hood bomb. To the right of the mushroom stem, the landscape can be seen on fire. Approximately 1 hour after the bomb went off, security guard Richard Migas drove through Ground Zero to set up a guard post at the Area 51 guard gate directly over the burning hills.
Next up, we have the Boyd Bushman photos. So Boyd Bushman is no longer with us, but he took with him to his grave many tales of the extraterrestrial friends he met as a Lockheed Martin engineer working within Area 51. At least that's what he claimed. In 2007, Bushman was filmed in a video talking with independent aerospace engineer Mark Q. Patterson about his experiences in the restricted area, claiming to have met several aliens, some of whom were hundreds of years old apparently and hailed from planet Quintumnia. Even said some of these Quintumians were employees of Area 51. Held up a bunch of photographs. The video became relatively big, but I gotta say, call me crazy, these pictures look not great. That alien looks like it's from Spirit Halloween. Nothing against Spirit Halloween. I go every Halloween, but not the most convincing. I think Boyd knew he was on the outs. He died not long after this interview, and I think he wanted to go with a little bit of a prank. Can't blame him. In fact, I respect him for it.
Number 6. Gabe Zeffman. Gabe Zeffman, a private pilot and amateur photographer, spent Christmas Day 2020 flying his Sonessa 150 plane over Area 51 and snapping just over 1,000 photos. He captured stunning visuals of the Nevada test and training range and Area 51, showing a mysterious triangle shape inside an open hangar. The hangar is just south of the main NTTR complex at Area 51, and the object looks large, although it is unclear. It does appear to be the only hangar that's open as well. In the videos of his flights posted on YouTube, Gabe can be heard getting clearance for his route over the restricted area. Now for this particular flight, he had higher quality photography gear that allowed him to capture better photos. So what's in the hangar? Seems like we may never know.
Number 5, the alien interview. So there's actually footage of this one, so yeah, not really photos, but I mean, isn't video better than a silly old still photograph anyway? This footage was shown in a 1997 documentary entitled Area 51, The Alien Interview. And the big selling point here was that you were gonna see real footage of Area 51 employees in the S4 facility communicating with an extraterrestrial on camera. The man behind the film, simply known as Victor, narrates through the footage, claiming to be former Area 51 employee and whistleblower who copied the footage, which was taken in 1989 before setting out to share it with the world. So you don't hear what was actually being said in the video. There's no sound other than the mysterious Victor relaying the information over the footage, but you do see what looks to be your classic gray alien moving around and opening and closing its mouth. I mean, if it was just a puppet, there was definitely some effort put in here, and by that I just mean they tried to make it look like it was moving.
Number 4, closest photos of the base ever. In 2017, Tim and Tracy of the UFO Seekers, who was mentioned before, hiked up the 1.4-mile high Tikaboo Peak, a mountain 25 miles opposite the mysterious military base, in order to capture the closest ever pictures of Area 51. From the peak of this mountain, the duo of UFO hunters used a special telescopic lenses to get the clearest photographs of the buildings and vehicles inside the top secret government site. The Area 51 pictures taken show what looks like a water tower, several complexes, and vehicles moving around.
Next up, we have the UFO. In December of 2019, Nevada resident Steve Barron shared pictures and video of this mysterious object flying over a mountain range close to his home. So whatever the object is, looks big. It's far off in the distance, but it's very noticeable and very bright. Definitely doesn't look like the small specks you get in the sky with satellites. It's super bright again, and it moves in a strange pattern too. It doesn't move at one consistent speed or in one single direction. There's a point where it kind of looks like it could be a satellite. It's moving through the sky in more of a traditional pattern, just straight across. But then it stops, starts moving back in the direction it was coming from, and seems to clip along at a good speed too. Like whatever this thing is, it's fast. So I don't know. Could be a drone, I suppose, but you be the judge.
Number 2, the aircraft. A passing commercial satellite seemed to have snapped its top secret next generation combat aircraft on the tarmac of Area 51. Tyler Rogaway of the War Zone was reviewing Planet Labs satellite photos of the high profile secret site when he spotted something outside the ordinary. The highly classified United States Air Force Nevada testing facility is usually especially careful. Air operations are timed out during the gaps between Earth observation and surveillance satellite overpasses. But in this photo, on the taxiway leading through a massive new hangar was a strange shadow. It appears to be a translucent tent. Inside is the outline of what appears to be an unknown type of fighter aircraft. Area 51 is always a popular spot when it comes to publicly available satellite imagery, Tyler wrote. When glancing at daily 3-meter resolution images of the base, we noticed the appearance of a roughly delta-shaped blob on the north apron of the large southern hangar. It stayed there between January 26 and 29th, 2022. So what was it? Why did they make this mistake? I don't know.
Next up, we have the Area 51 entrance. So a few years back, satellite photos were shared online showing what looked to be a possible entrance to the ever-elusive wonder that is Area 51. Someone was cruising around on Google Earth and spotted a road leading to a parking lot by the foothills of a mountain. Now, whatever this road leading to this parking lot was actually built for, it wasn't there back in 1998, where satellite images of the same area showed there to be no road leading to this dead-end area with the parking lot. So what's going on? It is pretty strange. Why have all these roads been built leading to a parking lots and seemingly dead-end areas by the side of a mountain? There's nothing there. It's not like, they'd park there and then walk all the way back down the road to go somewhere else. No, it seems as if there's a secret tunnel that's been carved into the side of the mountain. I think Bob Lazar said something about some mountain facility in Area 51. As for what's going on in there, your guess is as good as mine.
Number 10, strange lights. Since the 1940s and possibly even earlier, there has been a strange light phenomenon observed in the Hesdalen Valley, Norway. The spectacle has a form of white or yellow light of unknown origin standing or floating above ground level. Between 1981 and 1984, the lights were observed up to 20 times per week, but have drastically reduced in frequency since then, about 10 to 20 times per year. Now why the decrease all of a sudden, no one knows, and no one knows where the lights come from, but UFO enthusiasts took this as a sign that the valley was a portal to other worlds. Now it wasn't just conspiracy theorists that were interested in this, as the strange bursts of light in the 1980s attracted physicists too, and quests piqued by the idea of some unexplained natural phenomenon. In the decades since, scientists have determined the glow likely comes from air turned into plasma, but despite ongoing research and numerous working hypotheses, there is no convincing explanation of the origin of these lights, and it seems like it will always be a mystery. Number 9. Falling through the ceiling. Back in the 1950s, the Cooper family from Texas moved into their new house. Once there, they took a family photo to commemorate the new move-in. Everything was normal, but then when the picture was developed, the image of a body falling from the ceiling was clearly visible. Now to be clear, no one fell from the ceiling when they took the photo, so what happened? As further investigation on this story has brought no plausible explanation, there exists many speculations, including one that argues that the shadow is the ghost of a previous owner of the house. But my question is, why is he falling from the ceiling? It just doesn't make sense, and it's absolutely terrifying, and I can't even imagine the reactions when they got the photo back. Number 8. The Young Boy. One of the most famous haunted houses in the United States is the Dutch Colonial House at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The haunting stems from the night of November 13th, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo ended the lives of all 6 members of his family. He was then arrested, convicted, and given 6 concurrent life sentences. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the house and claimed that spooky things were happening. For example, George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which was the approximate time that Ronald committed his crimes. Kathy said she would feel a ghostly presence and be embraced by it. All of this and more caused the family to flee in fear after only staying at the house for 28 days, and honestly, I don't blame them. Due to this, demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house and set up time-lapse infrared cameras and caught this photo. Now this picture wasn't made public until 3 years later when George Lutz appeared on the Merv Griffith Show in 1979. Believers of the haunting believe that the photo is a picture of the youngest DeFeo son, John Matthew, who was 9 at the time of the deaths. Others believe it's a staged photo, but despite the controversy, this picture is one of the most frightening images from the Amityville horror. Number 7. The Madonna with the Saint Giovanni. This is one of the most famous unexplained images of all time. The painting, the Madonna with the Saint Giovanni, was created in the 15th century. While the focus of the picture is on Mary, something creepy hovers above her left shoulder. There's an object that appears to be some sort of UFO hovering above the cliffs, and just below it you can see a man and his dog looking up at the saucer. Now, why on earth would this be included in the painting? Is it proof that UFOs and aliens have been around for a long time and humans knew we weren't alone in the universe? I'm not sure what the explanation is, but to be honest, it scares me. Number 6. Ghost outside. This ghostly figure was captured on a security camera at the Hampton Court, a royal palace located near the Greater London area. In the 16th century, the palace was expanded and renovated to be fit for a king, complete with lush gardens, banquet halls, and Henry VIII state and private apartments. This palace has over 1,390 rooms, but it seems like they had an unwanted visitor. A figure appeared to be closing one of the palace's doors, but when guards arrived to the palace, nobody was there. Now, as the palace has a long and violent history, the figure is believed to be one of the several ghosts that are rumored to haunt the building. Number 5. The Sea Creature. Hook Island is off the coast of Queensland, Australia, and Robert Le Sirach, his family, and a friend, Hank de Jong, stayed there for 3 months in late 1964. On December 12, 1964, the Le Sirachs and Hank were crossing Stonehaven Bay on the island when Robert's wife noticed something odd in the water. It was a long, tadpole-like creature. It was black and was believed believed that it was at least 30 feet long. Robert and Hank decided to venture into the water and record it on film. When they entered the water, the monster was even bigger than they thought, but as they started recording, the creature opened its mouth and swam away. Then when they checked the film, they had no footage of the creature, but the picture clearly shows it. The pictures were published in a magazine and eventually spread across the world, making it one of the most famous and unexplained pictures of a cryptid. Now, there are a number of possible explanations as to what this creature really is. One is that it was just a plastic bag that had been used by the American Navy for experiments in towing fuel. It could be a deflated skyhook balloon covered in weeds, or it could be a roll of cloth that was tied together and placed in the bottom of the lagoon. Regardless of what it is, I wouldn't want to go near it. Number 4. The moon. In 1972, this image was taken by Apollo 17 during its flight to the moon near the area known as Geophone Rock. NASA listed this image as blank, but after retouching the photo, you can see that it's not completely blank. Turning up the contrast, a pyramidal structure can be seen. So what is it? Was it some malfunction of the camera, or is there actually a pyramid on the moon? NASA has never given a credible version of the issue, which has led to some speculations about what else can actually be on the moon hidden to public awareness. And listen, not to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but maybe it's true that aliens built the pyramids on Earth, as it looks like they did it on the moon too. And there was that one time NASA lost connection with an astronaut who was freaking out saying they're watching us from the moon, and what if the they they're talking about lives in those pyramids? Huh? Just something to think about. Number 3. South Forks Bridge. This image was first made available to the public in 2004 when it was featured in the Bartholomews Pioneer Museum's exhibit, Their Past Lives Here. The photograph was taken in 1941 at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Canada. When the museum digitized and placed the collection online that included this picture in 2010, the internet went crazy. In the image, there is a man who clearly stands out, and many think he is a time traveler. The idea of him being a time traveler hinges on 3 items he is seen wearing or holding that appear to be of too modern a vintage for the 1940s, a logo shirt, a small portable camera, and wraparound sunglasses. It just seems like he's completely out of place, but who knows? Number 2. Ghost in the Water. In 2014, Kim Davidson was swimming in a lake with a friend and their combined 3 children. They went to Murphy's Hole in Lockyer River in Queensland, Australia. While there, they took a photograph. But when the photograph came out, there was a ghostly figure of a girl behind the group who looked like she was leering behind the family. They said there was nothing in between them when the photo was taken, and on closely examining the image, they realized it was a white face with dark eyes and 2 horns on either side of the head. Its fingers are on Kim's shoulder and on the small girl's right arm. Kim posted it on Facebook, and upon seeing the image, many comments were made, and some said that the 2 horns looked like 2 ponytails or buns. A fellow user shared the story of Doreen O'Sullivan, a girl who accidentally drowned in the same creek in the same spot in 1913. Her obituary was found in the Brisbane Courier, dated the 22nd of November 1913. Now, the spot, which has always been considered dangerous, is known as Murphy's Hole and is over 20 feet deep. Upon reading this, Kim recollected that they had experienced strange things that day when they were swimming in the water. She felt someone's presence behind her, but she ignored it, and twice someone in the water even grabbed her elder daughter's leg. Now, by looking at this photo, she was convinced that the unknown face was that of Doreen. Kim got 2 paranormal experts to check the picture, and after investigating the photograph carefully, they concluded that the shape of the image was that of a child. And coming in at number 1, the Babushka Lady. The woman in the brown coat, or the Babushka Lady as she was later called by the FBI, was very close to JFK when he was assassinated in Dallas. Traveling in a presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas, JFK was assassinated, hit once in the back and once in the head. Kennedy was taken to Parkland Hospital for emergency medical treatment, where he was pronounced dead 30 minutes later. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald was charged with Kennedy's assassination, which he denied. Oswald was assassinated as well soon after. Now, the spawned numerous conspiracy theories. These theories allege the involvement of the CIA, the Mafia, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, Cuban Prime Minister Fidel Castro, the KGB, or some combination of these individuals and entities. The original FBI investigation and Warren Commission report, as well as the alleged benign CIA cover-up. But according to eyewitnesses, this woman, the Babushka Lady, filmed the entire thing. It's thought that from her vantage point, she may have been able to answer some critical questions about about what really happened that day. However, the FBI was never able to track her down, and no one has since been able to figure out the identity of this mystery observer.
Number 9. The Devil Portrait. This is a photo taken of an infamous image of the devil depicted in one of the most supposedly cursed books in history, the Codex Gigas, aka the Devil's Bible. Yeah, the Devil's Bible. Wonder why the church wouldn't want this book getting around. It's believed to have been written between 1204 and 1230, year-wise, not time of day, and changed hands several times before being housed in Sweden's National Library in 1768, where it still sits today. The book contains the Old and New Testament, as well as a plethora of other information of the time, but it's the magic spells that place the book in that cursed category, as well as the image of the devil, of course. And legend has it that this is not just any mere depiction of Satan. There's a dark tale behind it. It's said that the Codex Gigas was written by a monk who had broken his vows in some way and was being sentenced to death. There are many versions of the tale, but the point is he attempted to cut a deal. If he could write a book containing all the world's knowledge in a single night, his life would be spared. This is of course an incredibly unfair and impossible task, unless you have some sort of deity helping you, right? And said monk was tempted by the devil himself and ended up selling his soul to him in order to help complete the book. And this demonic portrait is actually said to be Satan's own doing, his very signature, which he signed at the end. It's also, in some versions, the monk drew it as a tribute to him as well. Number 8. The White Lady of Worstead Church. Taken in August of 1975 by Peter Berthelot, who is visiting the Church of St. Mary's in North Norfolk with his family. It shows his wife Diane sitting on a church bench, head bowed as she prays. Now, Peter claimed that there was nobody sitting behind his wife when he snapped the picture, but once they were showing their pictures in a slideshow several months later with some friends, one of them chimed in asking, "Diane, who's that sitting behind you?" They looked closer at the photo and were like, "Yeah, who is that?" Diane was quoted saying, "When we saw the white figure sitting behind me on the projector screen, we just stood there with our mouths open." Looking closely at the ghostly figure, it almost looks like a woman wearing a bonnet. Peter and Diane took the photo back to the church, where the vicar told them the story of the White Lady, the ghost of a woman who appears to those who need healing. And apparently at the time the picture was taken, Diane was having some health issues and was on antibiotics. Next up, we have the Sefton Church Ghost. In Maryside, England, just north of Liverpool, stands the Sefton Church, which finished construction in the 16th century. This image here was taken in 1999, and you can clearly see what looks to be a priest standing there. It's a cool photo, but looking at it without context, you wouldn't really think there's anything supernatural about it, if it weren't for the fact that the photographer, Brad Steiger, said that there was only one other person with him in the church at the time, another photographer who was standing right beside him. So who is the person or specter in this picture? Could it be the spirit of a former priest that still lingers within the walls of the church, or is it the same ghost that apparently haunts a pub next door called the Punch Bowl? Maybe it's both. I looked it up on Google Maps. The Punch Bowl is still there, literally right next door. It's an old-timey looking pub. It could be haunted for sure. At number 6, we have the Hospital Demon. This next image is incredibly mysterious, as there's not a lot of information on it. All we really know, or at least have been told, is that the image was supposedly snapped by a nurse at an unknown hospital in an unknown state. It was taken on a security camera and shows a patient lying in bed, and crouching on top of them is what looks to be some sort of demonic entity. It looks very much like your archetypal devil. You can see what looks like horns on its head. Its legs almost look goat-like with hooves. It's very creepy, even if it is a total hoax. Again, there's not much information on this image, but apparently the entity appeared briefly, and just a few hours after it showed up, the patient died. Is this the image of a genuine demonic entity waiting for the patient to pass before dragging them to hell? Is it just a hoax? Let us know your thoughts in the comments once again. And we're going back to the realm of cursed books now with the Grand Grimoire. This image here is one of the many illustrations associated with the Grand Grimoire. It's a textbook of sorts containing all sorts of black magic spells, believed to have been written in 1702. The book gives a detailed description on how to summon a specific demon and the tools used in order to make it do your bidding. It also contains various spells used for winning the lottery, communicating with the dead, making herself invisible, etc. I don't know. I gotta get my hands on this book. The book was readily available and became quite popular in France in the 19th century, and the church set out to vilify it, claiming this book and others like it to be sinister and dangerous, and their campaign was pretty successful. The book kind of died in popularity because, you know, people don't want demons in their houses, I guess. Don't know why. At the number 4 spot, we have the ghost of St. Botolph's. Now, to the untrained eye, this image looks pretty innocuous, right? It just looks like a church. But take a close look at the top right-hand corner. We'll zoom in for you. Yeah, it seems to be a ghostly figure standing by the balcony. The photo was taken in 1982 by a man named Chris Brackley. Apparently, he hadn't seen anyone standing by the balcony when the photo was snapped. It wasn't until he developed the picture that this strange entity showed up. The picture was analyzed extensively, and it was determined that it wasn't the result of double exposure. Chris's equipment seemed to be operating fine too. A few years after the picture was taken, Chris was contacted by a builder who had done restoration work on a crypt at the church, and apparently the builder had knocked down a wall and accidentally disturbed a coffin. Inside of it was a woman whose face was eerily similar to the one captured in Chris's picture. This next image was posted to Reddit by Reddit user u/LucidDream a few years back with the caption, "Real ghost or demon on the reflection of one of my friend's photos." Now, this is an image that would be really easy to fake, of course, but all the same, I hate this. This is a freaky picture and it makes me uncomfortable. It's hard to make out exactly what we're looking at here, but it's a picture taken of a mirror and you can see the reflection of a woman lying on the bed, and behind her is, yeah, I don't know what. I hope it's a dog, but it looks more like some sort of ghostly or demonic entity with a mane of messy black hair, very Grudge-esque. It's just your perfect example of a cursed image. There's just something off about it. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, as there's not a lot of info on it, but it's eerie. It's eerie. And at number 2, we have the cave demon. There aren't a whole lot of supposedly real photos of demons out there, but this one has been floating around the internet since the late 90s. According to the legend, 2 boys from England had been exploring a cave in the United Arab Emirates. At one point, they heard a man scream. It was too dark for the boys to make out anything, so they pulled out their camera and snapped a picture with the flash on. For a moment, the cave lit up, and they saw this goblin-like creature clinging to a rock. The boys immediately turned around and ran out of the cave as fast as they could. And finally, at our number 1 spot, we have the Spectre of Newbie Church. This is a pretty famous image, said to be one of the most convincing ghostly photographs ever taken. This photo was snapped in 1963 by Reverend Kenneth F. Lord, great name, in the Church of Christ the Consoler, located on the grounds of Newbie Hall in North Yorkshire, UK. The Reverend had been snapping pics of the church, and when the photos were developed, he noticed this mysterious, semi-translucent, cloaked figure standing at the church altar. He'd been completely alone in the church at the time. At least that's what he thought. First glance, it looks a bit like a plague doctor to me, almost. Skeptics took one look at this picture, though, and immediately called it a hoax, saying that the image was most likely the result of double exposure. It just looked too clear. The church was also not said to be haunted either. But the Reverend was adamant that what he took was real and sent the picture to experts to be examined, and it was determined at the time that the photo hadn't been tampered with at all. According to them, what was captured here was genuine. Whether it's an actual ghost or not, however, is still up in the air. This is also one that's really tall too. It's determined that whatever that thing was about 9 feet tall, so that is a very tall ghost. No thank you.
Kicking off our list at number 10, Late Night Dip. Alright, it wouldn't be a Taylor McWaters list if we didn't mention aliens more than once. This video was leaked last year in May. The footage is actually from 2019. It was recorded in San Diego. The Pentagon has since confirmed its authenticity. The UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon here, we don't say UFOs anymore, that's so old school. The UAP is sphere-shaped and is flying at extremely high speeds. No exhaust, no propulsion system, just a metal ball whipping by San Diego. The sphere then vanished into the water afterwards. So in case you're wondering, no, it didn't land, no aliens got out. They're like, hey, how fast was I going? No, none of that. We have no answers. No answers yet. Number 9, Talos.
Basically, I'm here to announce that we're building Iron Man.
Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit, aka Talos. It was once a project announced back in 2014, and like the former president said, this was supposed to be a modern day Iron Man suit of armor. Didn't end up being like that at all. It was supposed to change warfare entirely, but 5 years later, the project was scrapped. Or was it? It probably wasn't. Of course not. We're still working on Apple Watches. You're telling me they're gonna scrap this? Good joke. On one hand, obviously it's hard to do. We could barely launch Google Maps in one go, let alone a suit of armor. I imagine it's complicated. Sure. But with recent leaks, we can now take a peek at what could have been. See, ideally the suit would have given the user advanced tactical awareness alongside advanced military grade armor, which has an exoskeleton underneath that's wired to the helmet and the rest of the suit. You're pretty much Iron Man. They figured out a few things while creating the suit, but overall this Iron Man armor wasn't close to being like what we're seeing on the big screen. We're getting pretty close. We're getting alarmingly close, I'd say. Number 8, the Kola Well. If you dug a hole through the center of the earth and jumped in, would you come out the other side? Of course not, this isn't a cartoon. But the Arctic Circle back in the 70s sure did look like a cartoon. The deepest hole on the planet. Yeah, let's gather resources and focus on this for a bit. Sure, during the Cold War, we love it. Scientists began working on the project in 1970. For many years, Russian scientists in winter coats were drilling a hole, just down as deep as they could get. What a great job that would be, eh? They got 1/3 through the Baltic continental crust and they found rocks older than 2 billion years. It was quite the project, it was exciting. But eventually they hit this muddy lava and then in 1992, they stopped drilling. A huge concern here was that demons would be released from the earth. That's fair, that's more than fair, that's an okay concern. We don't want those around, I get it. The previous title for the deepest hole belonged to the United States Bertha Rogers Hole, which reached 31,000 feet. The borehole still remains the deepest artificial point on Earth. Now, it was odd for the United States to focus on beating the Russians to the deepest point on Earth. We talk about the space race often, but we forget about this one. The deep hole race. Stanley Yelnats would be so disappointed in us. We gotta talk about this more. Number 7, radar footage. Now normally when we see leaked footage, be it of UAPs or leaked documents, it's always the worst quality, right? It's always taken with like a BlackBerry curve. It's hard to believe when military footage is horrible quality. Like, we're trying, help us help you. Like, how can we see photos of black holes and not have a photo of a UAP yet, right? Or do we? Well, Jeremy Corbell is here to help. He took to Twitter in May 2021 sharing footage of US Navy ships being swarmed by UAPs. This time we have radar footage from inside the ship. It came from the Combat Information Center in the USS Omaha. This 46-second clip was originally recorded on July 15th, 2019, and you could even hear a dude in the background yell about how fast the objects in the radar are moving. That's how you know it's authentic. It's a guy like, whoa, that's crazy. On that ship too, imagine what he's seen and he's surprised. I'm shook. Number 6, the Amityville photo. A little ghost stuff for us, why not? This photo was taken inside the Amityville house back in 1976. You see it's the boy with the eyes? Nice, you got it, nice, good eye. At first, I thought this was from a horror movie. It looks fake almost, or set up, until you start to read the details. See, this photo was taken with automatic cameras equipped with infrared. So this ghost here probably wasn't expecting a selfie, right? Photographer Gene Campbell took this photo in 1976. Gene was working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren on this case. Yeah, this was long before the movies. They were just really working on this case in real life. This is history. This is so scary. The photo was revealed 3 years after it was taken on the Merv Griffin show, and many believe this is the ghost of John DeFeo, one of the boys who lived there in 1974. Now, you can't really do this anymore, right? You can't just whip out photos from an otherwise, crime scene and be like, okay gang, is this a ghost? Let's take a look. No, there was obvious backlash for obvious reasons. It took 3 years for that photo to reach the public eye, and now all of a sudden everybody is talking about ghosts. Did this help? Probably not. Again, this was long before The Conjuring was ever released in theaters or anything like that. This would have been so random to see on TV, how frightening. Also, who believes in ghosts here? What's the ratio? Comment down below, I'm genuinely curious. I'm like 50-50 in the ghost game. Number 5, quantum computer. This next one is pretty scary, not a fan of this one. Computers are getting more and more advanced by the day. Andrew Garfield told everybody that Spider-Man leak was fake, and we're all like, okay, we'll believe it. Yeah, we believed it. That's how good technology is. It's getting dangerous. Poor Andrew Garfield, but also poor us. We're for sure doomed any day now. But thanks to our man Snowden, Edward Snowden, it was reported in the Washington Post back in January 2nd, 2014, that the NSA is secretly working hard at creating their own computer. It's called the quantum computer, and it cost around $80 million to build. It's a little more expensive than the new iPad. just a touch. This computer is safely stored in a massive room-sized metal box, not intimidating at all, and it's part of a program called Penetrating Hard Targets. So it can break encryptions for just about anyone, anything, finance records, medical records, your old MSN, hopefully not, but maybe. What a nightmare that would be. The NSA is well on their way to breaking every form of public encryption, so we're doomed. This quantum computer can theoretically break through any RSA encryption as well, which for the average computer today, that takes years. The supercomputer can break through a lot faster. So yeah, you better clear that history now while you still can, or else everyone's gonna see. Number 4, more government leaks. Even allies of the United States weren't safe during Edward's leak. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the United States was spying on Germany, France, and Spain, all at the same time. Horrible. The NSA tapped into 35 phones spying on 35 different world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA publicly immediately after finding out and said this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. That hits deep, eh? I thought we were friends, we're pulling that card out? Ooh, world leader or not, nobody was safe during these phone calls. It was also reported that the NSA was monitoring calls in Spain for the average folk. Yeah, they monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month. Imagine how boring that job would be. Just some dude listening like. Number 3, North Sentinel Island. Heading over to India, this island is home of the Sentinelese tribe, one of the most forbidden islands on the planet. We don't talk about this island nearly enough. It's fascinating, and it's also equally terrifying. It's located in the Bay of Bengal. North Sentinel Island is about 1,200 kilometers away from India, and while most islands are shrinking or just disappearing, this one actually grew back in 2004. Yeah, the island lifted up a couple of meters during an earthquake, so the west and south sides gained an extra kilometer. Yeah, more room for more inhabitants. Let's talk about them. The inhabitants on this floating cursed island are among the few uncontacted tribes left in the world. They've apparently been there for 50,000 years, and there's no signs of agriculture or even fire, yet somehow this tribe has thrived for this long. And if we try and get close and, talk to them or see what's up, they try and drive everybody away, violently. In fact, back in 2006, 2 fishermen lost their lives because they got too close to the island without knowing who was on it. The Indian government also didn't roll up to the beach after and start interrogating locals. Instead, they made the island now officially forbidden to enter, so stay away. Number 2, the mouse with an ear on its back. What a transition, awesome, we love segues. Back in 1997, Stuart Little here became the test subject to determine if scientists could grow cartilage using chondrocytes, aka cells from a cow. And it worked, and now we're still talking about it today, obviously. It all started when Joseph Vicanti, pediatric surgeon, began designing human organs. This was during a shortage. He wasn't just, bored and started to make ears. He was changing the medical game, and little did he know he was actually about to change the science game as well. He constructed an ear and then told his brother Chuck and his partner Bob to not bring up the fact that he attached said ear to a live mouse. He's like, please don't mention the mouse, please. How can you not? Here, check out this new ear I made. Hey, 1 sec, let me catch it. What? That's disgusting. What's going on here? What's this science lab you have? So Chuck spilled the beans. He didn't keep said information to himself. Can you blame him? No. But good thing he leaked the information because now we know cow cartilage can create cells. All because he spilled the beans. Nice. Thanks, Joseph, and also thanks to that mouse that totally didn't volunteer for this life. Can I Q-tip his back? I want to Q-tip his back. Let's clean that little ear for him, I bet that would feel great. It's like a back scratch, but an ear Q-tip at the same time. Imagine those mixed. Stuart Little, he's got it. And finally, number 1, motorized roller skates. This last one, they've been working on for quite a long time. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen working on this channel, so yeah, I had to end off this list with this. Motorized roller skates, what a dream. Is it happening? Are we close? I sure hope not. This photo was taken at the Sunoco station in Hartford, Connecticut. Context aside, this is an odd one. It's a guy with a briefcase filling up at a gas station, and he's wearing roller skates. Is this 2077? No, it's actually 1956. And that futuristic looking man right there, that's Mike Dreschler. He was working for a Detroit skate company, and he was very dangerously close to gas-powered roller skates. It sounds like something from a cartoon where he's like, oh, I'll get you, pew, and then he blasts off. This would never, don't try this. This is a horrible idea. They would have cost around $250, which today is around $2,400, and its max speed was 17 miles an hour, so you'd still be late and you'd still be buying gas. It was a lose-lose. Imagine this in the closing act of a Mission Impossible movie. How boring would that be? Now obviously the public wasn't supposed to see this. They feared that it would encourage folks to get creative on their own. So yeah, I'll reinforce that. Don't make rocket skates with gasoline. Thanks. Hit that thumbs up and don't make rocket skates. We love it. Don't eat Tide Pods or make your own jet boots.